All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are ready to begin our first session of today's forum. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning. Salam Malaysia Madani. On behalf of our host, Academy of Sciences Malaysia, welcome to the National Planetary Health Forum. Let's put our hands together for ASM for being able to successfully to organize this forum today. Allow me to formally welcome our dignitaries, starting with Yang Mulia Academician, Datuk Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin, the President of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, who also serves as the STI Advisor to the Prime Minister and the Nation. Yang berbahagia, Academician Professor Emerita, Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, Chairperson of the NPHAP. Yang berusaha, Puan Hazami Habib, Chief Executive Officer of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, representatives from government, industry, academia, and civil society, ASM Expert Network, ladies and gentlemen. This forum brings together leading voices and stakeholders. It's nice to see everyone here today. We're looking forward to the exchange of ideas. And the whole point is, of course, to strengthen Malaysia's commitment to protecting health of people and the planet, bringing together government agencies, experts, communities to address the urgent challenges of climate change, biodiversity loss, pollution, and food security. So, ladies and gentlemen, to kickstart the morning session, please join me in welcoming the Chief Executive Officer of ASM, Yang berusaha Puan Hazami Habib, to deliver her opening remarks.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi taala wabarakatuh. Yang Mulia Academician Datuk Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin, President of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, also serve as the STI Science Advisor to the Prime Minister and the Nation. Yang berbahagia Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, Chairperson of the National Planetary Health Action Plan, ASM Expert Network, esteemed partners and stakeholders from the Quadruple Helix, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Salam sejahtera and very good morning to all distinguished guests, partners, colleagues and friends. First and foremost, it is with great honor on behalf of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia to welcome all guests here today for the introduction of our National Planetary Health Action Plan. This milestone marks a pivotal moment in our commitment to safeguarding the health of our planet and in turn securing a sustainable and healthy future for generations to come. Our planet is facing unprecedented challenges, from climate change and biodiversity loss to pollution and resource depletion. These issues are interconnected and have direct and indirect impacts on human health, ecosystem, and economies, demanding not incremental improvements, but systemic transformation. The time has come for a unified strategic approach to address this urgent concern. The National Planetary Health Action Plan embodies our collective resolve to integrate health, environment, and development. It emphasizes innovative solutions, cross-sector collaboration, and sustainable practices that will not only protect our natural world, but also enhance the well-being of all communities, especially the most exposed. Planetary health is about our shared responsibility to care for the earth, for ourselves today, and for future generations. It reminds us that human health is inseparable from the planet's well-being. It calls on us to practice fairness, protect biodiversity, use resources responsibly, and commit to sustainable action. Above all, it encourages a mindset of care, compassion, and ethical responsibility for our environment and all living beings. Today's forum is meaningful not only for the Academy, but also for Malaysians. The National Planetary Health Action Plan, or known as NPHAP, is our country's and world's first comprehensive whole-of-nation framework which positions planetary health at the heart of our national development. For all Academy initiatives and policy studies, we put planetary health as one of the key building blocks. As you can see in the exhibition outside this hall, we have incorporated planetary health into Science Outlook, ASEAN Ahead, Malaysia Blue Economy Blueprint, Precision Biodiversity Project, and National Education Reform, amongst many. Today, we have lined up leaders in planetary health to share their thoughts and views on how they play their role in mainstreaming the principles of planetary health in their sector like academia, government, industry, civil society, and youth. As we continue the journey together, the discussions, insight, and partnership formed here will help translate the NPHAP from a strategic plan into meaningful impact on the ground that protects our natural heritage, strengthens public health, ensures food and energy security, and uplifts the community at large. I would like to give a special thanks to Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asmah Ismail, Chairperson of the NPHAP, for leading this study to its successful completion. To the 76 NPHAP working group members involved in this process from the beginning to the end, thank you once again for your dedication. Your leadership and contributions are essential to ensuring that Malaysia not only adapts to the challenges ahead, but thrives within planetary boundaries. Later this morning, we are honored to have the Minister of Science, Technology, Innovation, YB Tuan Chang Lee Kang, with us to officiate the introduction of NPHAP report to the public. I hope all of you remain with us to be part of these significant moments. May today's forum inspire renewed commitment, bold ideas, and collective action as we move the NPHAP agenda forward towards a healthy planet, healthy me, prosperous Malaysia, leaving a legacy for our children. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi ta'ala wabarakatuh. Thank you.
Waalaikum salam. Thank you very much, Yang Berusaha Puan Hazami Habib, for your opening remarks. So, ladies and gentlemen, we would like to request that you turn your attention to the screen here on the main stage for a plenary speech by the Faculty Director of Johns Hopkins Institute for Planetary Health, Professor Samuel Myers, who will be talking about living well for people and planet, advancing planetary health together. Let's have a look.
Dear Excellencies, esteemed colleagues and friends, it is really an enormous honor to have the opportunity to congratulate you on the extraordinary achievement of launching the first ever National Planetary Health Action Plan anywhere in the world. My name is Sam Myers, and I am the director of the Johns Hopkins Institute for Planetary Health, so the founding director of the Planetary Health Alliance. And the last 10 years have really seen an explosion in the field of planetary health since its sort of launch with the release of the Rockefeller Lancet Commission report in July of 2015. The last 10 years has seen the proliferation of new journals in planetary health, new degree programs, new cross-university centers and institutes, new regional and national initiatives, and really an extraordinary growth of the global field of planetary health and of its associated community of practice. The reason I think behind that explosion is a recognition that we're in a moment in which the global Earth crisis has reached a scale and a pace that is now driving a global health and humanitarian crisis. We in the health sciences around the world are increasingly sounding the alarm that we can no longer effectively do our jobs. We can no longer safeguard human health into the future while the natural life support systems that we all depend on are crumbling under the weight of our own collective ecological footprint. In order to move forward, we need to reverse our degradation of our natural life support systems and embrace rapid transformational changes in how we do just about everything, from energy systems to food systems to manufacturing and the need for circular economy to green chemistry to planetary health cities. What's so exciting to me about the release of this national action plan is that it is a first major step by an entire nation to embrace this idea of a great transition and to think holistically across a sort of whole of nation approach to how we catalyze that great transition and how we bring ourselves back into balance with the life support systems that we all depend on. As your president of your Academy of Sciences in Malaysia has said, we are, quote, living in a defining moment. And I think it's incredibly exciting to see the leadership that's coming out of Malaysia in meeting that moment with urgency and commitment, and by taking an approach that really cuts across all of government. As Professor Emerita Dr. Azma Ismail has said in her preface, with every year of delay, the risks deepen, economic losses grow, health costs rise, and our children's futures become more insecure. And essentially what she's saying is we can no longer sort of kick the can down the road, that the longer that we wait to really meet this moment, the harder it becomes to meet it effectively. And I think what's so exciting about this plan is the extent to which it isn't yet another policy, it isn't yet another sort of replacement of a framework, but in fact, it is seeking to connect and amplify all of the policies and approaches across the Malaysian government. And in that context, I think it becomes a very, very meaningful roadmap, not only for Malaysia, but really for the rest of the world in grappling with how, as a global society and as nations, we can begin to meet the moment and to bring ourselves onto a much more hopeful trajectory in which we are protecting and regenerating the natural life support systems that we all depend on. So it really is a huge honor to have the opportunity to congratulate you and also to thank you for the extraordinary leadership that you are showing the world, and for the example that you're giving all of us to point to. And so with gratitude and a great deal of humility, we thank you for the leadership you are offering us, and we look forward to being partners with you as this work continues to unfold. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Professor Samuel Myers. Valuable messages via that video playback. No introduction there. He's a recognized expert in planetary health, has authored over 100 scientific works, co-edited the award-winning book, Planetary Health, Protecting Nature to Protect Ourselves, and his contributions have earned him prestigious awards, including the Arel Global Food Innovation Award and the Prince Albert II of Monaco Prize. So, ladies and gentlemen, next up is an introductory session on NPHAP communication, education, public awareness, and action strategy presented by the Chair of Values, Cultural Shift of Society, Behavioral Change and Communication Working Group Committee, Yang Berbahagia, Professor Tan Sri Dr. Jamila Mahmud. Let's have a look.
Assalamualaikum and good morning. Thank you for having me on video. I'm really sorry not to be there. It's such a historic day. When we talk about planetary health, we're really talking about people, about protecting the air we breathe, the food we eat, the water we drink, and the communities we love. And it's so appropriate that I'm actually recording this from Belém, where COP30 is now ongoing. For too long, we have treated environmental, health, and economic issues as separate problems. The National Planetary Health Action Plan is Malaysia's way of bringing them together. It places people and values at the heart of decision-making, using science, technology, and innovation to guide that change. But most of all, it's about doing, about turning our shared concern into collective action. The science is clear. 7 of 9 planetary boundaries have now been breached. These are the limits that keep Earth safe and stable. Here in Malaysia, we are seeing it too and experiencing extreme weather, polluted rivers, rising health risks, food insecurity. We have written enough reports. We have raised enough awareness. What we need now is implementation. Consistent, coordinated, courageous implementation. That is what this plan demands of us, and what the Values, Culture and Behavior Change, or VCBC, the team have set out proposals included in the plan. These are all built to help us deliver. The work of the Values, Culture and Behavior Change is anchored in communication, education, public awareness and action, or CPA. It is our national strategy for turning ideas into habits and commitments into culture. Communication means one shared story. Healthy planet, healthy me, prosperous Malaysia. It means explaining the plan in ways that matter to people's lives. Lower bills for electricity, safer food, cleaner air, healthier air, healthier communities. It's about reaching Malaysians where they are in the languages, faiths, and traditions we live by. Education ensures that planetary health is built into how we learn, teach, and lead, from schools and universities to the public and private sectors. Through the transformational sustainability leadership modules, we will be equipping decision makers to act differently, not just talk differently. Public awareness makes the invisible visible. The air we breathe, the waste we generate, the water we share, the water we pollute. Campaigns will focus on high-impact actions, cutting food waste, saving energy and water, choosing sustainable products, explaining the transition away from fossil fuels, supporting green technology, green businesses, especially small and medium enterprise. Action is where change becomes real. It's where we design systems that make the right choice, the easy choice. No plastic defaults, incentives for sustainable businesses, recognition for community leaders and young people, and public dashboards that track progress transparently. This is how we move forward from intent to impact, by hardwiring values and evidence into everyday decisions. Because the evidence shows us that behavioral change is not about telling what you do. It's about building conditions that make good choices natural and rewarding. That's why the VCBC works on 4 levers: values and culture, partnering with faith and community leaders to make stewardship a moral norm; social proof, showcasing early adopters, schools, SMEs, villages that are already leading the way; choice architecture, ensuring sustainable options are visible, affordable, and convenient; and feedback, giving people real-time evidence through local dashboards so that they can see how their efforts improve health and quality of life. When people see progress, they stay engaged. That is how culture shifts, not through speeches, but through visible results. We are reframing success itself. The old measure, return on investment, is not enough. We need return on values. This means tracking how our actions strengthen resilience, improve health, and protect nature, and rewarding these outcomes. When ministries, industries, and communities measure what truly matters, we will change how budgets are allocated, how projects are judged, and how success is celebrated. Return on values is not a slogan. It is the compass for Malaysia's future. To make this real, the National Planetary Health Action Plan includes concrete tools: the impact tracking framework to measure change and sustainability, the transformational sustainability leadership modules to embed systems thinking, and the environment genomic database to link science with public decision making. And we will build a culture of citizen science where communities collect and use data on air, water, food, and health themselves, taking ownership of the change they want to see. Implementation begins with when every ministry, every state, and every community uses these tools to guide their work, not as add-ons, but as part of how government and society function. When Malaysia hosted the Planetary Health Annual Meeting in 2024, we showed the world that a middle-income nation can lead boldly on planetary health. We presented a vision rooted in science, values, and solidarity. Now, the real test begins, turning that vision into results. The National Planetary Health Action Plan is how we move from global recognition to local implementation. It is how we prove that an integrated, values-driven approach to governance can work in practice, not just on paper. If we can demonstrate the implementation, not just vision, Malaysia will stand as living proof that compassion and evidence can drive prosperity in the 21st century. Implementation will only succeed if we work together under one shared umbrella, the proposed National Sustainability Council. This council will bring government, business, academia, civil society, and communities to one table so that every decision strengthens both people and planet. For government and public agencies, let's make this plan live in everything we do, in how we set policies, coordinate across ministries, and between different levels of administration, planning events, funding projects, and making decisions that shape everyday life. For business and the media, we tell the stories of people and communities already choosing a healthier, greener path. Show that doing good for the planet is also good for business. And if you're not yet doing it, get on board. Don't be left behind. The future will belong to those who lead with purpose. For our universities, schools, teachers, young people, take the lead. Turn ideas into experiments and experiments into action. You are the generation that can redefine what progress looks like. And for our faith leaders, community groups, and civil society, weave care for creation into daily life, in prayers, festivals, community cleanups, and local traditions. That's where our values become visible and where national plans become personal. When we act together, guided by the Council's shared vision and by our shared values, implementation becomes more than a plan. It becomes the way forward for Malaysia. And when every one of us acts from our shared values, implementation becomes unstoppable, because true implementation happens when every sector owns a piece of the work and when we hold each other accountable for results. This plan is a promise, but promises mean nothing without delivery. We can no longer afford incremental change. Every year of delay costs lives and livelihoods and stability. But every step of implementation builds resilience, trust, and hope. When values guide our choices and evidence guides our systems, behavior change becomes culture, and that culture will sustain us. Let's make planetary health the Malaysian way of life. Healthy planet, healthy me, prosperous Malaysia. Thank you.
Powerful message there. Thank you, Yang Berbahagia, Professor Tan Sri Dr. Jamila Mahmud. So ladies and gentlemen, to deep dive into our action plan, it is with great honor for us to welcome the chairperson of the National Planetary Health Action Plan, Yang Berbahagia, Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, to give a keynote speech. Yang Berbahagia, Datuk.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera and a very good morning to all. Terima kasih ucapkan kepada MC. Yang Mulia Academician Datuk Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin, the President of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, who also serve as the Science, Technology and Innovation Advisor to the Prime Minister and the nation. Yang Berusaha Puan Hazami Habib, the CEO of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, all the Academy Science Malaysia Expert Network, esteemed partners and stakeholders from the Quadruple Helix, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to share what we have done on the National Planetary Health Action Plan. I think my job was already made easier with the introduction from Professor Sam Myers, who is one of the world's authority on planetary health, and of course the champion, our local champion for planetary health, Tan Sri Jamila. I think she has put a lot of those perspectives that I want to share, as she has already shared that as well. Let me begin the conversation by saying that what we do to the earth will bounce back to affect human health, because humans and environment are forever intertwined. And in today's human age, or what we call Anthropocene era, the human activities, as Sam Myers has said, have now become the dominant force shaping the Earth's climate, shaping our ecosystem, and actually our geology. Our natural systems are now being degraded to an extent unprecedented in human history. And guess what? Who's the cause of that? The cause of that is us. We humans have now become a powerful driver of the environmental changes unfolding today. And basically, we need, as both the speakers before me had said, fast actions need to be taken to safeguard our planet. So in 2015, as the world embraced Sustainable Development Goals, Malaysia was there in New York to sign the declaration. So in 2015, as we are all there in New York, the scientific community, led by Rockefeller Foundation, introduced a concept called planetary health. The Rockefeller Foundation Lancet Commission is a milestone because that defines planetary health as the health of human civilization and the state of the natural systems on which it depends. Now, planetary health basically recognizes the deep interdependence, interconnection between human health, animal health, environmental health, right? So it is basically an interdisciplinary and transdisciplinary approach that focuses on the interconnections between human health, animal health, and the health of the Earth's natural systems. Well, this is the time that we all learn about the concept of planetary boundaries. How do you know how much does it take to destroy the planet? So the planet's natural system, essentially, ladies and gentlemen, can support a lot of our activities, but we need to operate within a safe space without risking significant disruptions that could essentially destabilize the Earth system. So planetary health actually now requires understanding of not only how human, ecological, and economic systems connect, but also how far these systems can be stressed. So this is the next $6 million question. Well, how much stress can the planet take? Right? So essentially what they have shown is that the world, we have 9 planetary boundaries as stated, climate change, novel entities, etc. We have 9 of these boundaries, and if we maintain the balance and integrity of these critical processes, we can ensure that the planet remains hospitable for current and future generations. So basically, the health of the planet is very much dependent on how our activities affect the planetary boundaries. And if all 9 of that planetary boundaries have been breached, then there is no planet B. Okay? So bottom line, this is the most crucial question. We want economic progress, but how do we have now economic progress that now must be balanced with societal well-being and maintaining the Earth's natural systems? I think we all are striving for that state of balance. Let's look at how much our planet can now take, right? In 2009, 7 out of the 9 boundaries have been assessed, and 3, we crossed 3. Basically, we breached 3 boundaries. And in 2015, 6 years later, we did another assessment of 7 planetary boundaries, and we crossed 4. In 2023, 8 years later, we now cross, out of the 9 boundaries that has been assessed, we crossed 6. And in 2025, within a space of 2 years, right? Before was 6 years, 8 years. Now within a space of 2 years, we crossed 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. And basically what we cross is now ocean acidification, all right? So yeah, this is what happens, right? The more orange it becomes, the more we're destroying, right? So this is a beginning. Then you will say, sikit aja, ceh aja. But it will now move fast depending on how much interference and how much destruction we are now doing. So you see, within a space of 2 years, we can actually now breach the 7th planetary boundary. So ocean acidification was identified, and basically since the industrial era, ocean acidity has increased by around 30 to 40%, essentially eroding the ocean's stabilizing role. And marine ecosystems are already showing damage. Corals, Arctic species, tiny sea snails, all called petropods, these are a key food chain species, are all now becoming vulnerable. And this breach has cascading consequences for biodiversity, for our fishery, for our blue economy. You know, when you talk about it, have we now noticed this kind of thing that is now happening? Global climate regulation, and essentially when all this is affected, it will bounce back to affect the human health. So basically, maybe, ladies and gentlemen, what we need to understand is the interconnectedness and the shared consequences to human health if we don't take care of the planet. So when one layer is stressed, it will ripple across the rest, and because, as I said, everything is connected, and the consequences of what we do is now going to be shared. So human well-being is inseparable from the health of the natural systems. I think Tan Sri Jamila has already done all that explanation. Yet, human activities are causing this unprecedented harm to the natural system, threatening both planetary health and human health. We talk about pollution. We continue with pollution, we're going to have respiratory disease, it can lead to cancer of the lungs and so on and so forth. So we have that. We have biodiversity loss. How much learning do we need with the advent of COVID-19? That is also now part and parcel of all this happening. Right, we have climate change, and you can see with some there's a lot of rain. There's now a lot of high heat, very hot areas, and we all have heat stroke and so on and so forth. Students can no longer go out to the playground to play in the schools because of the high temperature. So we have all these things now happening to us. How much more change can we accept? How much more stress can we put on the planet that we can say, it's time to change? Okay? So to create this lasting solution, it is essential. See, whenever we have a flood and destroy parts of the home, and what do? We give subsidy, subsidy, subsidy. Did we solve the root cause of the problem? This is the question that we need to ask. How much more can we take? Right, by giving subsidies without looking at what is the root cause of the problem. And this is what we need now to address, right? Rather than just treating the symptoms. As Sam Myers has said, how much more? We can't, as clinicians, we can't do much more already in the medical sector to now be able to improve the health without now looking at the root cause of the problem, which is the destruction of the planet and planetary health, right? So this is the essence of what this is all about, okay? How do we balance economic progress, societal well-being, and maintaining the environment? And this is a very good concept that Academy Science has now come up with. I salute the CEO and the entire team from the graphic sector of Academy Science for coming with this idea. This is the near-extinct begonia species, all right? Pokok asam batu for Malaysians. This is pokok asam batu found in Perak, which is already near extinct. And on the left is the map of the development of Kuala Lumpur. Okay, so you can see side by side, how do we can't stop Kuala Lumpur from having economic progress, and a lot of other cities as well. We also want to see economic progress, but how do we now balance that? So this is a beautiful thing that we now see, all right? Pokok asam, if you look at the structures inside the leaf, almost tells you about the structures that is happening in development of Kuala Lumpur. Okay, so how can we now have or revive back the begonia species so that we can also have that balance, all right? So this requires, there's a lot of people in this audience. I'm not sure how much you know about all those things. I am very sure you have heard about sustainability, you have heard about planetary health, you have heard about SDG, you have heard about ESG, and some audience may be on the kelabu asap mode or what we call blur, that you have heard about this, but how do they connect? All right, we are doing different parts of it. Some of the companies inside this hall probably is now taking care of ESG and saying to people, hey, we have done ESG, what more do you want us to do? All right. So basically now maybe we should now, stand back and actually see what is the bigger picture. Sustainability is the broader concept. It is the umbrella. So it focuses on creating systems, environment, social, economic, that can last over time without depleting resources or harming the future generation. Now, planetary health is a specific focus within sustainability, which I will show you, that looks at the interdependence between human health and the health of the Earth's natural system. Then we have this concept called SDG, all right, with 17 interconnected goals adopted by United Nations in 2015, adopted by Malaysia as well, to the point that we now have an SDG Council in the nation as a blueprint for a more sustainable and equitable future for 2030. They address the challenges like poverty, inequality, climate change, environmental degradation, peace and justice, and require collective action from all countries. Then we have ESG, environmental, social governance, a framework used to assess a company's sustainability and ethical impact on how the company interacts with the natural environment, how it manages relationship with people like employees and customers, and how it is led and managed. But then again, ESG is not just an initiative. It is also how we do business responsibly. So how do they all connect? Okay, how do they all connect? So a lot of the time, all of us, when we want to tell people that we are rah, and very into sustainability, we wear this little pin with this multicolored round pin here, and we say to the world that, yeah, we are into sustainability. But if that pin here was now taken from this angle, from the side angle, this is how this pin, this round pin, if you now look at it from the side angle, this is called what WHO call the wedding cake. Because of this blurriness about people doing ESG differently, planetary health differently, all this, WHO faced that problem and said, how do we now connect so that people now understand what this is all about? If you look at the biosphere, which is the green thingies here, all right, these are the basic foundation of the environment that we're talking about: water, air, marine, land, and so on and so forth. So this is the planet, all right? This is the planet. Then we have the society. This is societal goals. They are related to health, education, equity, peace, strong institution. And then on top of that, that is the economic goal, okay, that ensures economic well-being. So what this model called the wedding cake, which is done by Johan Rockström on behalf of WHO, is that the economy is very much, economy at the top here is very much dependent on society. And societal well-being is very much dependent on the biosphere. So essentially, according to WHO, planetary health is the core of the SDG, and protecting our planet is key to achieving the ESG, SDG, whatever goals you want to have. If you don't take care of the planet, there's nothing left to talk about. So basically, when the Earth's natural systems are degraded, social well-being will suffer. And when social systems break down, economic progress falters. So please, ladies and gentlemen, remember they're all interconnected. And what connects them all is that key word called values. Values can be seen in many forms and shapes: spiritual values, personal values, all those things. If we don't value our biodiversity, our khazanah, we will not take care of the biodiversity at all. We don't care. We just see them as part and parcel of what the nature can provide in terms of economic progress. So this is where we say value is very important. Do you value the water? Like when you're brushing your teeth, you keep on leaving the tap water open, right? And you don't shut, knowing that water, good quality water, is scarce. When you clean your car, right? Do you bother about the fact that you're wasting a lot of clean water to clean your car? So these are the kind of things that we say we don't value, then most of these things we will continue to degrade the ecosystem. So this is Malaysia's turning point, okay? Malaysia, if you look at this study, which is done in Science Outlook, just look at the blue, okay? So Malaysia experienced steady economic growth, all right? Between 2000 and 2019, science and technology was advancing and then stopped, all right, and plateaued, all right. But these economic gains came, look at that, at the expense of environment, at the expense of society. So this is what Malaysia has been doing. And the question that needs to be asked is that what is the cost of doing nothing? We can say, okay, this is the way it is, but what is the cost to the country of doing nothing? And the cost is very expensive. By 2019, premature death linked to environmental issues cost Malaysia USD 64.2 billion, which is 7% of the GDP. That's a lot that the country can do with 7% GDP, right? And between 2005 to 2022, the cost grew by 161%. Ladies and gentlemen, that's what I'm talking about. Every time we have a flood, we continue with subsidy, and so on and so forth. This cost is now growing to 161% without looking at the root cause of the problem. So if you look at EPI, our Environmental Protection Index, we see that this is Malaysia in 2012, pristine, 25 out of 132 countries. And then we went to our, economic progress at the expense of societal and environment. We went, from 25 to 130. The bigger the number is not something that we should be proud of. Okay, so we are 130 out of 180 countries, and so I asked the question, with all these new policies that's coming in RMK 12, RMK 11, RMK 12, RMK 13, do we see a change? Do we see a change? And so we see now from 130, we are now down to 117, but still there's a lot more to be done before we can come back to 25. All right, so this is where now we say academic science, insights from academic science for strategic studies on precision biodiversity, on our Science Outlook 2020, on our studies on COVID-19 and zoonosis, all revealed rising outbreak risks and mounting environmental pressure. Something needs to be done. And together they underscored the urgency now for a forward-looking science-based action. So in response, the proposal, this is where academic science now put all these studies together, and we say enough is enough, we have to do something about it. So we put up the proposal called the National Planetary Health Action Plan that was then tabled to the National Science Council, chaired by the Prime Minister on the 4th of April 2022. And after listening to that, there was a very positive response from the Council. So the National Science Council actually mandated the National Planetary Health Action Plan through MOSTI and ASM to lead the development of this action plan. And this action plan grounded in science, because as we now move forward, science now become a very important tool or an enabler to help solve some of the problems that we face. So we now grounded in science, technology, and innovation. And of course, not working alone. Working on national planetary health has got to have a whole nation approach. So we say, enough of working in silo, we need to bring in central agencies and key ministries as well. So this is the plan. This is what people are looking forward to hear. What exactly is this all about, right? And what kind of change have we done that Sam Myers now admire? How is it that this country has now come up with this idea? So we started out by saying, what are the 4 principles? You don't simply say, come up with the framework, come up with how we do things. What is our grounding principle? And we say our grounding principle, number 1, it has to be humanity-centric. Not human-centric. We've been human-centric for some time, and that's how we are degrading the planet. We gotta be humanity-centric. That means we must now be aware that the action that we do and how does that now affect the planet, right? So this is some of the things that we have. And humanity-centric also needs to know and understand when you use STI, how does it enable you without, destroying the planet as well. And if possible, nature-based and values internalized. Okay, humanity-centric, as has been explained by the speakers before me, placing people, especially those most vulnerable, at the center of every decision that we are making, at the center of every policy that we now put up in the country, right? And it has to be STI enables. How do we do that? We harness the STI levers for resilience as well as for sustainability. Nature-based means we need to value the ecosystem as critical infrastructure that needs to be preserved, right, for the health, security, and well-being, and values internalized, meaning to say we want to embed these universal spiritual values, ethics, intergenerational justice in all the policy and the planning. When I talk about values internalized, it essentially in Rotterdam already show how we separate from a regular framework to now suddenly now having values. Because when we have values, then we feel that's how now we have people now to own what this action plan is all about. So basically when we use STI as the enabler, it can be used now for data and monitoring so that we can now predict what's going to happen, not just monitor, but predict what this country lack is monitoring that needs to be done and evaluating every step that we have done. Is it improving or is it going downhill? Then we have the technological innovation to scale the nature-based green technologies, advanced sustainability and health. We have interdisciplinary research. This is why in even the higher education blueprint, we are now emphasizing on impact, on having interdisciplinary research. Science alone cannot provide the answers to everything. It has to now use the concept of STEAM, whereby we combine with the arts now to foster collaboration across the country, policy, communities, and business to now co-create holistic solution. Policy and governance, nothing will happen unless the policy is there, the governance is there for the country to make it happen. So we want to embed STI insights into the national framework, ensuring inclusive, transparent, and adaptive governance. Local and global collaboration. Again, taking care of the planet is not about Malaysia alone, all right, because it has to be everybody taking care of the planet. So we need to build partnership for knowledge exchange, for technology transfer, capacity building, especially for the vulnerable communities. So basically, when we start talking about the 4 principles, then we say, okay, in the usual normal way of how to create an action plan, we say, what are the areas? What are the areas that we need to now look into? Environment and health, we have sustainable food, research and education, energy transition, governance, and values cultural shift of society, behavioral change, and communication. This is new because we now say, if we want to have all this happen, how do we communicate to the rakyat? Otherwise, this is now going to be some ministry thinking again. So bottom line, we say we are going to do all that, right? And we have experts within each of these areas who now think about, okay, what are the concerns, and then what is the action plan that needs to come forth, right? So we're doing all that, and we do this in many shapes and form, focus group discussion, surveys, and so on and so forth. Ladies and gentlemen, if we continue to do things like this, we are no different than what are the action plan that any country can now come up with. So what's the big deal? So we are no different, because why we have to ask the question, why is it SDG fail? Why SDG fail? Why SDG cannot take off? Only what, 25%? It fails because when the people who design the SDG says the whole thing is interconnected. But when it is implemented, it becomes now fragmented, silo-based, each ministry taking care of one thing. Ministry of Health taking care of health, this NRS taking care of biodiversity. You know, every ministry take care of their own. It will not work. So we say it's very important that each of the key result areas are not implemented in silo. If it is, we are no different than what the rest of the world is now doing. And they need to be interconnected to ensure coherence and integration. All right? The question is how you're going to do it. Okay. Let me tell you, it is not easy to convince all the top people in environment, sustainable research to now change a mindset, because everybody is so used to doing things in silo. This is the normal way, right? So we say, we say it has to interlink. Now, can you imagine? We already have the action plan for environment, for sustainable. Now we are saying, hello, can now we come together and now say, can we now interlink all these action plans so that now we are more focused in how we now move forward? And that's how we come up. What holds all these plans together now is 5 shifts. And this 5 shifts is that we say we need to strengthen the governance and management of the nation's natural khazanah. That means for environment, for food, whatever, we have now this governance that can now control all of that. Okay? Shift 2 is to nurture people to lead a healthy, prosperous, and values-driven nation. Again, this ties all of these action plans together. Shift 3, planet-friendly business, because if we don't bring in business into the discussion, all of these things will not work either. Effective communication, behavior, and values mindset. This is the most very important. Implementation, what's going to make it work is the change, is the mindset change. If the mindset change is not there, it won't, and you don't communicate well, you won't see a behavioral change. And to turn around, to reverse the breaching of the planetary health boundaries, it does require mindset and behavioral change. And the last one is sustainable financing, because you can have all these ideas, but the finance, the budget is not allocated for it, it also will not take off. So sustainable financing and resourcing planetary health development initiative. This, alhamdulillah, you know, it's not easy to have 70 experts in the Malaysia to actually now come to an agreement, all right? So that is, I think, the most difficult part of my work as chair. But I'm so very, very lucky that we now are together in moving this agenda. And that's how we come up with only 53 strategies and 222 action plan. But you know, all these things going to happen unless leadership is muy importante. You can have the people understand, but the number one don't understand, nothing will change also in the organization or even in the company. So transformational, sustainable leadership needs to be there. So we come up with the module. This is Malaysia. Everything we do, we wait for RMK 13, RMK 15, then only we monitor and evaluate. That's 5 years down the road. A lot of things can happen within 1 year. So that's why we need an impact tracking framework. And this impact tracking can be done with the fact that we now have artificial intelligence that can now put this together and actually can now not only impact, not only monitor, can predict. Now, this is the way forward. What is it that we need to do? So we have all these experts in Malaysia. This is high time to put all of them together. And of course, we need to know what's happening somewhere, right? So the environmental genomic database framework is also needed to be there. So this is how now transforming Malaysia to contribute to a healthy planet. That's how we come up to healthy planet. Not healthy you, but healthy me. Because if I look at you, you're not doing it, I'm not doing it either. But more important is me. You need to change yourself first. That mindset change, that behavioral change. So that's why we say healthy planet, healthy me, inshallah, prosperous Malaysia. Okay. So bottom line is that, you know, as we say, doing this action plan, if we are back to ROI, nothing changed again. Again, we are asking for return on investment. So we need to now talk about something different, return on values. All right, return on value. So what ties all of our plans together is also return on values. Because if you take care of Mother Earth will always take care of you. So this is why we now say the difference that we now have for Malaysia, that they were all admiring, that we can do something like this. All right, so values now become very, very strong in how we do all this action plan. So in short, the National Planetary Health Action Plan brings all 6 of these areas together into one integrated framework that is held together by the 5 systemic shifts, and we unify all of that by return on values and grounded on 4 foundation principles. So to our knowledge, what we have done is the first among ASEAN countries and in the world. So when we now talk about it, yeah, easy said than done. So what is it? So of course, there are many critics in the room that will probably be asking that kind of question as well. So how do we operationalize it and how do we monitor it, right? So the National Planetary Health, Malaysia's national commitment to healthy planet, healthy me, and we embed that into the planetary health, into our daily life, into our decision making, ensuring that every policy, investment, innovation all supports a future where people and planet thrive together towards a sustainable and resilient future. So this is the 4 that we put forward to the government, okay? Number 1, an integrated national governance. This is very essential to implement and monitor this cross-sectoral, cross-ministerial action plan with a longer term, I mean post-2030, SDG finish in 2030, what do we do after 2030? So we would suggest to the government, instead of just having an SDG council, can we now move forward in 2030 or even earlier to create a sustainability council? Because like I said, all of this is now part and parcel of that wedding cake, right? Sustainability council to align strategic direction and oversee all these little things, SDG, ESG, planetary health implementation. Then the second thing that Sam Mayers is quoting us most of the time is driving a whole nation approach. a whole nation behavioral change supported by a transformational sustainability leadership module that hopefully will reshape leadership across public, private, and the community. Then, with the AI and whatnot that we have, building intelligence system, including a national environment genomic database framework to actually strengthen environment and health monitoring, and establishing a robust impact tracking framework to now monitor, to evaluate, and improve the effectiveness of planetary health initiatives. Again, what sets the plan apart? Because again, there will be people in the room that says, we have so many plans already. What's so big deal about this National Planetary Health Action Plan? So Malaysia has many of these policies over the years. What makes this action plan different is that it does not stand apart from this policy, but it connects all these policies and then amplifies them. All right? So in the past, strategies were often implemented in silo. As I said, one ministry will take care of biodiversity, the other will take care of energy, another will take care of health, and another will take care of food. So basically, with this plan, we hope to break down the silo, aligns all this action, and make sustainability a shared responsibility across government, business, academia, and society. And of course, as we now move forward, it got to embed STI at its core, ensuring the plan is not only comprehensive, but it's also systemic, practical, systemic maknanya interconnected every time we make a decision and future ready. So earlier policies should lay the groundwork, but the current plan connects the dots, mobilizes STI, and builds a bridge towards a Malaysia that is now more resilient, more fair, and prosperous, but thriving within planetary boundaries. So this is a very important reminder. So again, to the rakyat, what does it mean? All right, sebab the success of the plan, as every one of the speaker and every one of you know, is about implementation. If the implementation is wrong, nothing will happen. It can be a beautiful blueprint and then it just be shelved. So basically, to have an effective implementation, it's very important that Malaysians truly feel a sense of ownership, all right, over planetary health. Yet, the concept of planetary health itself can be very abstract because you cannot hold that planet in your hand that you can now say, okay, what can I do about it? So to some Malaysians, maybe makcik Kia on the street, probably will say, this is something abstract. I don't quite really understand what it's all about. And at the end of the day, leaving people feeling powerless, sometimes disconnected and wondering, do any of my small action really matter? Right? That if I now close the tap when I'm brushing my teeth so that I don't waste water, does it really matter? All right. If I now switch off electricity when I go out for lunch in my room, does it really matter? So this kind of things need to now, we need to put this into perspective because the solution, first of all, the bridge to all of this is knowledge. From knowledge, it will lead to awareness, and from awareness, it will now bring into action. So that's why we need to mainstream planetary health in education, not just in the universities, from preschool, secondary school, all the way to the universities. And this, alhamdulillah, is now being done because from the schools, the preschools, all the way, when academic science was involved in the national education reform, all of this is now accepted as part and parcel of change. And especially with the higher education blueprint, this is now mainstream as part of the trust for the higher education blueprint as we now go forward. So we're going to have in Malaysia the planetary health, mainstreaming of planetary health in education. And of course, when we do that, there is a need for effective communication. You can now have several ministries doing their own communication, and sometimes the communication can be very technological, can be very technical, to the point the rakyat don't understand what is being said. So basically, communication at different levels need different ways. We have to de-jargonize sometimes, to make it more relatable. That is the word that I want to say, yeah? Relatable. Yeah? So everyday choices that people make, like reducing food waste, conserve energy and water, plant more plants, for example, support planetary business and using public transport. All this can be small, but ladies and gentlemen, if you multiply that across 32 million Malaysians, they can shift markets, they can cut pollution, and they can lower the cost and inshallah drive a lasting change. So this is why we say it has to bring down to the rakyat. The rakyat must own planetary health. Okay, so for all the work that we have done, we presented this on the world stage on 7th of October 2025, recently at Rotterdam. It was a difficult time for me as well because, you know, this is the people around the world listening and to say whether they like it or not. And Sam Mayers and the whole team listened to that and immediately gave the plaque to honor the government of Malaysia as the first nation to create and implement a National Planetary Health Action Plan. So this is the success that we have, right? And what they have quoted is that Malaysia's forthcoming plan exemplifies the proactive measures needed to advance planetary health worldwide. We are proud to spotlight Malaysia's initiative and anticipate its positive impact. So, yeah, now we present the next year, they're already asking us, what have you done? So that now becomes more difficult. Of course, I leave that to the President of Academy Science. All right, so as we now go forward. So, and of course, it caught the attention of His Royal Highness Sultan Nazrin Shah in his talk, and it was in Bernama. Malaysia has now charted its own path forward through the National Planetary Health Action Plan, a national framework, the first of its kind in the world. So basically, ladies and gentlemen, what you want to know about the plan, please use this QR code and you can get all the various volumes that we have done on the plan. And I would like to say, on behalf of the 70 research experts and analysts that helped make this plan into reality, I want to give them a big thank you. They have given with ideas, with suggestions, and ideas comes from the team of 70 people with the research and the analysts, but the suggestions come from 3,571 scientists, policy makers, civil society, youth, business, all people in faith, and also I have to thank everyone that is now involved because, ladies and gentlemen, we cannot do this plan alone. So let us collaborate to now make a difference to a healthier planet. Sekian, wabillahi taufiq. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam. Thank you very much. Yang berbahagia Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail for that powerful message, really riveting presentation. Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Ismail is the immediate past president of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. She currently serves as the Vice Chancellor and CEO of IMU University, Pro-Chancellor of Mawib International University, and also the Chair of the National Education Reform under the 13th Malaysia Plan. So on behalf of all of us, thank you, Professor Emerita Datuk, for championing, and to your team for continuing to champion this noble cause. Another round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, to Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma. So, ladies and gentlemen, we will now go for a short coffee break. We will reconvene here at 11:15 a.m. sharp in readiness for the official launch of the forum today. So, please be sure to be here at 11:15 a.m. sharp. And please take this time to visit the exhibition outside. And if you have any other questions, feel free to approach any of our secretariat team who will be more than happy to assist you. We'll see you soon. Thank you for your patience, ladies and gentlemen. We are ready to start now. Ladies and gentlemen, please rise to welcome the arrival of our guest of honor, Yang Berhormat Tuan Chang Lee Kang, Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, accompanied by our distinguished guests. Let's give him a round of applause to welcome him, ladies and gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain standing for the national anthem, Negaraku. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Please be seated. To bless our event today, we now invite Mr. Lukman Hakim Ruzman to lead the Dua recitation.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Alhamdulillahirabbil alamin. Hamdan yuwafi ni'mahu wa yukafi'u mazidah. Ya Rabbana lakal hamdu kama yanbaghi li jalali wajhikal karimi wa azimi sultanik. Allahumma salli ala Sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Ya Allah, in conjunction with the Malaysia National Planetary Health Forum, we seek your blessings for a flawless progress of this event, from the beginning till the end. We seek your guidance to stay clear of events that will be detrimental to the progress of this event. Ya Latif, Ya Rahman, bless this assembly of scholars, scientists, and visionaries. Grant us the clarity to seek knowledge, not for pride, but for purpose, to build a world where intellect becomes the foundation of unity, justice, and harmony. Bless our leaders, our institutions, and our nation, with continued wisdom and foresight, that we may stand strong as a community, where intellect nurtures peace and knowledge strengthens humanity. Ya Rahim, Ya Quddus, grant us with valuable knowledge that will be beneficial to mankind. Inspire us to uphold the trust of caring for this planet, to protect its balance, nurture its resources, and safeguard planetary health for the well-being of all generations to come. Bestow peace to our beloved country and shield us from all forms of conflict. Preserve this earth from destruction due to human ignorance. Grant our country and the entire world with safety, peace, calmness, tranquility, progress, and development. Rabbana atina fid dunya hasanah wa fil akhirati hasanah wa qina adzabannar wa adkhilna jannata ma'al abrar ya azizu ya ghafar ya rabbal alamin. Wa sallallahu ala sayyidina Muhammad walhamdulillahi rabbil alamin.
Thank you, Mr. Lukman Hakim. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to formally welcome everyone, starting with our guest of honor, Yang Berhormat Tuan Chang Lee Kang, Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation. Welcome, YB. Yang Mulia Academician, Datuk Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin, the President of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, who also serves as the STI advisor to the Prime Minister and the nation. Yang berbahagia, Datuk Ruzia Shafiee, Deputy Secretary General in Planning and Science and Culturation of MOSTI. Yang berbahagia, Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, Chairperson of NPHAP. Yang berusaha Puan Hazami Habib, Chief Executive Officer of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia. Representatives from government, industry, academia and civil society, our fellow ASM expert network, members of the media, ladies and gentlemen. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Salam sejahtera, salam Malaysia Madani. Once again, on behalf of Academy of Sciences Malaysia, ASM, welcome to the National Planetary Health Forum. Let's give ASM a round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for this noble initiative. Now, earlier we had the privilege of hearing from our distinguished speakers that has set the tone for today's program. A lot of powerful message shared, and we continue to hear more from our attendees today. So in just a moment, we will proceed to a significant highlight of today's event, and that is the introduction of the National Planetary Health Action Plan, which marks a crucial step forward in charting a coordinated, evidence-based and action-oriented approach to advance planetary health at the national level. Without further ado, allow me to invite Yang Mulia Academician Datuk Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin, the President of ASM, STI Advisor to the Prime Minister and the nation, to deliver his welcoming remarks. Yang Mulia Tengku.
Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Very good morning and salam sejahtera to all. Yang berhormat Tuan Chang Lee Kang, Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation. Yang berbahagia Datuk Ruzia Shafiee, Deputy Secretary General, Planning and Science and Culturation, MOSTI. Yang berbahagia Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, Chairperson of the National Planetary Health Action Plan. Yang berusaha Puan Hazami, CEO of ASM, ASM Expert Network members, esteemed partners and stakeholders from the Quadruple Helix, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure and privilege to welcome all of you to this important occasion, our first collective step as key players in working together to inaugurate Malaysia's journey towards advancing planetary health. Your presence today reflects our shared purpose and commitment towards shaping a sustainable future for the nation. On behalf of the Academy of Sciences, or ASM, I wish to express our heartfelt appreciation to YB Tuan Chang Lee Kang for his presence and unwavering support for this initiative. Today's National Planetary Health Forum, entitled Making Planetary Health Malaysia's National Mission, marks a historic milestone as we introduce the National Planetary Health Action Plan, or NPHAP. It is the first of its kind in the world, and Malaysia's integrated whole-of-nation framework to safeguard the well-being of both people and planet. This platform brings together key players across the Quadruple Helix to collaborate, co-create, and catalyze transformative programs for the collective implementation of the action plan. Ladies and gentlemen, we are now living in post-normal times, an age of uncertainty and rapid change marked by complexity, chaos, and contradiction. Climate disruption, biodiversity loss, and pollution are destabilizing ecosystems while societies face widening inequality, urban pressures, and recurring health crises. Too often, we have normalized profit over purpose and short-term gains over long-term resilience. The recent Planetary Boundaries Science Lab report revealed that humanity has breached 7 of 9 critical limits for a safe and livable Earth. Norms underlying these unviable patterns must be denormalized and replaced with new norms that uphold ethical stewardship, fairness, and responsibility for the sake of future generations. These converging crises highlight the fact that human and planetary health are inseparable. The planetary health paradigm recognizes that our well-being depends on the integrity of the Earth's natural systems. When these falter, so too does our collective prosperity and stability. It is no longer enough to pursue sustainability in isolation. We must transform how we value our planet and live in harmony with it, guided by science, ethics, and shared purpose. The urgency to act is undeniable. Incremental change is no longer sufficient. Each of us across government, industry, academia, the scientific community, and civil society must play our part in restoring equilibrium between people and planet. No single discipline, sector, or institution can act alone. Collaboration is our strongest tool. The time to act is now. Ladies and gentlemen, to address these challenges, Malaysia's response must be integrated and mission-driven, aligning science, policy, and society towards a single goal: the preservation and protection of life on Earth for the nation's sustainability and well-being. In the aftermath of the COVID-19 pandemic, which disrupted the entire world, ASM's leading movers and shakers accepted the stark reality that our interconnected world has become extremely fragile and vulnerable as a result of humankind's relentless pursuit of material growth and development. Let me share my own experience of having to deal with planetary health. During the COVID period, I was a nobody at that time, just a simple fellow of the academy, but I was shown a set of slides that integrated a few of our studies, about 2020 or so, and it hit me at a very emotional level. Normally, as a scientist, I'm not emotional. But when I saw those slides, I was highly emotional because our colleagues put together a set of material that showed clearly that humanity is facing a grave crisis. So I actually communicated with our team members to say that, let's go for it. We must make planetary health important and, of course, the top agenda for the country. Thus, in 2022, we began the mission to formulate NPHAP, tabling it to the National Science Council in December last year. ASM is extremely grateful to the NSC for giving the NPHAP its stamp of approval, considering that this is a pioneering effort with no precedents in the world. The action plan draws upon insights, strategic recommendations, and solutions from four of our major studies: the Science Outlook, COVID-19 report, Zoonosis report, and Precision Biodiversity. Countless stakeholder engagements were conducted, touching more than 3,500 stakeholders and respondents. NPHAP serves as an integrated and comprehensive framework to drive the National Level Action Plan, guided by science, technology, and innovation, or STI. Clearly, the environmental crisis that we face today is the consequence of misuse and abuse of science. It is only proper that science is again called upon to produce urgently needed solutions. However, this time around, innovation efforts must be outcome-driven, governed by human values and principles, and conducted in collaboration with all stakeholders. The action plan outlines practical pathways for system-wide transformation, from governance reform, sustainable development alignment, and responsible production and consumption, to reshaping behaviors and mindsets. By integrating environmental and human health, institutionalizing accountability, and placing well-being and resilience at the center of progress, the action plan aims to move Malaysia beyond incremental improvements towards systemic transformation that safeguards people, protects the planet, and secures long-term prosperity. More than a guide, NPHAP is a national mission and a global statement of intent, NIA. It is an invitation to act collectively with foresight, integrity, and compassion to protect the future of humanity and the planet we call home. The action plan consists of 3 core implementation mechanisms: the Transformation Sustainability Leadership Module, the Impact Tracking Framework, and the National Environmental Genetic Database Framework, which together provide the institutional, technical, and cultural capacity to deliver a whole-of-nation transformation. NPHAP embodies the spirit of partnership in development, co-created through collaboration across the quadruple helix. It stands as a strategic, mission-oriented framework, enabling Malaysia to respond to complexity with agility, creativity, and resilience. Ladies and gentlemen, the National Planetary Health Forum today aims to introduce the action plan. More importantly, it is a call to all of you, our key partners across the quadruple helix, to collaborate, co-create, and drive the transformation initiatives needed to realize Malaysia's planetary health agenda. This forum serves as a mission platform to exchange ideas and explore new pathways for transformation. In advancing planetary health for the nation, we need to bridge science with policy, knowledge with practice, and values with innovation. Creating a shared vision will have a significant impact on strengthening our networks and partnerships for sustained national action. This forum forms part of our broader communication program to promote greater understanding of the plan. A clear-cut, robust response expressing strong collective commitment towards its successful implementation would be highly valued and appreciated. These efforts include the mini exhibition outside this hall, which showcases national planetary health initiatives and best practices, including indigenous knowledge. Planned activities include the publication of fact sheets on the ASM website and social media platforms, as well as media engagements to deepen public appreciation and discourse on this important topic. Ladies and gentlemen, our call to action is clear. Let us make planetary health a national mission as vital as economic growth, inclusive education, or national security. Human agency implies that each and every one of us has a role to play in safeguarding planetary health. Individually or collectively, we have the capacity to shape the future. ASM will continue to provide foresight, evidence-based advice, and serve as an objective convening platform across the quadruple helix. As we move forward, let planetary health be the foundation of our national development and become our guiding compass, uniting science, spirituality, and stewardship for the well-being of all. Before closing, I would like to express our deepest gratitude to Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail for spearheading this landmark initiative. To the NPHAP working group members for their dedication and very hard work, and to MOSTI for their steadfast support in this national mission to advance sustainability and well-being. Thank you. Wabillahi taufiq wal hidayah. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Thank you very much, Academician Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin, the President of ASM, and also the SDI Advisor to the Prime Minister and to the nation. Thank you, sir. We truly appreciate your continuous leadership and guidance in driving this initiative forward. And I do believe that it is a very heartwarming thought that all the leaders are hands-on. If there's any example that I pleased to announce, if you look at Tanjung Malim itself, YB Minister's home ground, there is a Center of Biodiversity and Conservation. And because as MOSTI sits at the planetary health intersection of human well-being, environmental stewardship, and technological advancement, the ministry's support is vital in continuing to be the key driver in this national priority. So it is with great honor for us to invite our guest of honor, Minister of Science, Technology and Innovation, MOSTI, Yang Berhormat Tuan Chang Lee Kang, to deliver his officiating speech.
Yang Mulia Academician Datuk Dr. Tengku Muhammad Azman Sharifuddin, the President of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, and also serve as the SDI Advisor to the Prime Minister and the nation. Yang berbahagia Datuk Ruzia Syafiee, Deputy Secretary General of MOSTI. Yang berbahagia Academician Professor Emerita Datuk Dr. Asma Ismail, Chairperson of the NPHAP. Yang Berusaha Puan Hazami Habib, CEO of the Academy of Sciences Malaysia, ASM Expert Network, esteemed partners and stakeholders from the Quadruple Helix, members of the media, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning, afternoon. Very good afternoon. Salam Malaysia Madani. Today marks an important milestone as we gather at this forum to advance Malaysia's national commitment to safeguarding the health of our planet. This is an effort to ensure that human development and planetary well-being progress in tandem. Like many countries, Malaysia has faced increasing costs from environment-related disasters. Such examples are floods, landslides, and disease outbreaks such as dengue. The impact on health is even more serious. Worldwide, millions are affected by polluted air and water, poor sanitation, and extreme heat. Globally, such impacts translate into billions of dollars in economic and social losses each year. Overall, Malaysia loses an average of 39.8 billion ringgit every year, equivalent to approximately 3% of our GDP in 2019 and 2020. This highlights a crucial truth. Without urgent action on planetary health, the consequences will become even more severe and costly. During the 12th Malaysia Plan period, significant progress was made in safeguarding planetary health. The greenhouse gas emissions intensified to GDP ratio dropped by 37.1% in 2021 compared to 2005 levels. aligning with the target of a 45% reduction by 2030. Household recycling rates increased to 37.9% in 2024, up from 35.4% in 2023. These realities have taught Malaysia an important lesson. We have seen how health crises can disrupt every aspect of life, including the economy, education, and social stability. The question we must ask is this: if another global health crisis pandemic emerges, are we ready? Ladies and gentlemen, to tackle this issue, the National Science Council mandated the Ministry of Science, Technology and Innovation, MOSTI, through Academy of Sciences Malaysia, ASM, to lead the development of the National Planetary Health Action Plan in 2022. It is an integrated national roadmap designed to embed planetary health into the core of governance, industry, education, and everyday life. The NPHAP was shaped through a 10-step engagement process involving hundreds of stakeholders such as scientists, policymakers, community leaders, young people, private sector actors, and civil society voices. Your collective contributions have been instrumental in bringing this plan to life. The NPHAP outlines Malaysia's path towards a healthier planet and society, anchored in 6 key results areas, driven by 53 strategies and 222 action plans. The plan redefines progress beyond return on investment, ROI, to also embrace return on values, healthier people, stronger communities, greener ecosystem, and long-term resilience. Guided by principles that are humanity-centric, STI-enabled, nature-based, and values internalized, the NPHAP positions Malaysia as a responsible steward of the planet and as a nation nurturing globally competitive talent for a sustainable economy. I'm pleased to share that recently, the Planetary Health Alliance at their annual meeting in Rotterdam recognized Malaysia for being among the first to mainstream planetary health in national development. This positions Malaysia as a committed player on the world stage, championing efforts to create a healthier, more sustainable future for both people and the planet. To advance these goals, MOSTI is prioritizing 5 focus areas aligned with planetary health, which are hydrogen, artificial intelligence, biotechnology, aerospace and satellite technologies, as well as a vibrant startup ecosystem to accelerate green innovation. Ladies and gentlemen, looking ahead, Malaysia aspires to become a developed nation by 2030, built on an equitable society and an inclusive, progressive economy that prioritizes planetary health and upholds good governance. In this context, MOSTI remains committed to driving R&D that delivers innovations aligned with planetary health. Our goal is for new products, technologies, and systems to make a meaningful contribution to a healthier and more sustainable future. Under the 13th Malaysia Plan, efforts will be further strengthened to safeguard planetary health. Key priorities include enhancing climate change and environmental management, reinforcing flood mitigation and adaptation measures, and ensuring the preservation and restoration of biodiversity. The NPHAP charts a bold yet achievable path for Malaysia's sustainability journey. To bring it to life, we must act decisively in 5 key areas. First, we must strengthen institutional leadership through the National Sustainability Council to align priorities and drive coherent action. Second, measure that truly matters by using the impact tracking framework to assess progress across the environment, society, economy, and governance. Third, invest in environmental intelligence through a national genomic database and data systems to monitor biodiversity, pollution, and health risk in real time. Fourth, shift mindsets through education, training, and communication rooted in our cultural values. And finally, redefine progress by financing what we value, directing resources towards sustainable industries, nature-based solutions, and communities that create lasting social and environmental good. Ultimately, planetary health must become a national conversation, and education is key in shaping mindsets and behavior towards a culture of sustainability. Ladies and gentlemen, the challenges of planetary health cannot be solved by the government alone. They require the combined strength of every sector: policymakers, scientists, educators, businesses, and communities. Malaysia embarked on this journey recognizing that safeguarding planetary health is not an option, but a necessity. Let us move forward with shared purpose and resolve. Together, we can secure a thriving planet and a sustainable future for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Abu Hurma. We would like to request that YB Minister to remain on stage and make his way to the terrarium part. And we would like to invite our dignitaries, Professor Datuk Asma, Datuk Tengku Azman, Puan Hazami, and Datuk Rozia, to make your way onto the main stage, joining YB Minister behind the terrarium podium. So, ladies and gentlemen, to signify the introduction of our action plan today, a tropical terrarium was put together, symbolizing the ecosystem of our planet, whereas water symbolizes the rain that gives life to our planet. So what our dignitaries are going to do on stage is, each of them will take a spray bottle each and spray some mist onto the terrarium to signify giving life to the elements that we have around us. But because this is a collective effort, let's all do a countdown together. 3, 2, and 1. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. The official launch of National Planetary Health Action Plan and also the forum. If you can give a couple of seconds for our members of the media for their photo and video coverage. One of the species that was included in the tropical terrarium is begonia, and that is one of the many threatened begonia species in Malaysia. And with that symbolic gesture, let this be a commitment for all of us here to restore and protect the ecosystems that sustain life on Earth. And now we would like to request YB Minister and our dignitaries to make their way center stage. Now, to mark this occasion, we will now present the National Planetary Health Action Plan books, consisting of the full report of the action plan, which holds the executive summary and the transformational sustainability leadership module. This will be presented to Yang Berhormat Minister and all dignitaries. The National Planetary Health Action Plan, developed by ASM as mandated by National Science Council, aims to mainstream planetary health into all national policies and development plans through a whole-of-nation approach. And this action plan serves as Malaysia's strategic blueprint to place planetary health at the core of national development. Let's give a couple of seconds for our members of the media for their photo and video coverage. All right, as we collect the National Health Plan book, we are also proud to announce that the government of Malaysia has recently been recognized internationally as the first nation to create and implement a National Planetary Health Action Plan with vision, foresight, and commitment, setting a global precedent. And this recognition was conferred by the Planetary Health Alliance at the Planetary Health Annual Meeting in Rotterdam, Netherlands on 7th October 2025. And we will now invite Academician Professor Emerita, Dr. Asma Ismail, to hand over the recognition plaque to the Malaysian government from the meeting to YB Minister. A round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, for this amazing accomplishment. And with this recognition comes a shared responsibility where each of now must play a role in safeguarding the health of our people, our planet, and our natural khazanah. Thank you once again, YB, for officiating the forum, or for being a part of the plan book. And we now would like to invite our guests of honor and our dignitaries back to their main seats for us to begin the next agenda of the National Health Forum. So, ladies and gentlemen, to communicate our action plans to the general public, we would like to present you a special video capturing the purpose, principles, and priorities of the National Planetary Health Action Plan.
This land is our khazanah, the legacy of our forefathers. We are bound together in one fragile circle of life. And for decades, Malaysia has risen. But with our rapid growth, the balance began to waver. And when one is unwell, then all is unwell. Today, we stand at a crossroad between crisis and opportunity. What legacy do we choose to leave our children? To move forward, we must rethink what growth means. Development doesn't have to be a win-lose situation. When driven by purpose and care, growth can create value for all. This is where the National Planetary Health Action Plan comes in. A roadmap for shaping a future where progress and planetary well-being is one shared journey. Through its interconnected framework, Malaysia's progress begins. Priority areas take focus, strategies come alive, and coordinated initiatives ensure impact. From classrooms to communities, from laboratories to local ecosystem, we safeguard our khazanah. Because we have the power to act. This is Malaysia's commitment to a healthier tomorrow. Let's act now. After all, we do not inherit the earth from our ancestors. We borrow it from our children. This is us, leaving our legacy to our children.
Leaving a legacy for our children. Ladies and gentlemen, the action plan is now available online. You may scan the QR code that we are sharing sometime about now. There it is. And you can explore the communication plan materials and learn more about Malaysia's strategies for planetary health. Please feel free to disseminate this information to your organization, family, friends, everyone. And we will keep adding new materials on planetary health from time to time. Once again, thank you very much, YB Minister, for officiating this momentous occasion. And thank you to our dignitaries for their leadership. So without further ado, we are now ready to introduce our third part of today, and that is the panel forum session, where we will be going in depth on the topic of advancing planetary health, bridging policy and practice. Yang berhormat, honored guests, ladies and gentlemen, the third phase of our forum with the panel forum session will now explore planetary health for the lens of policy, examining how national strategies and frameworks can be translated into practical actions that safeguard our environment, public health, and communities. as we give a bit of time for our stage crew to get the setup sorted. Please feel free to take out your devices and scan our QR code and do a bit of exploration and see all the benefits and all the powerful documents that have been shared, all the hard work that has been compiled, and the journey doesn't end here. In fact, it's just starting. And of course, we are very excited to share this noble initiative with everyone. So ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, allow me to invite our moderator and our panelists. We will be joined by some key industry players with amazing accomplishments in their field of studies. Moderating this session is a renowned news anchor and journalist that needs no introduction from Astro Awani. Please welcome Mr. Luqman Haris Shakir. Luqman, are you here? Could you stand up and wave to everyone? And joining him on stage, ladies and gentlemen, Professor Dr. Pauline Bala, Fellow of Science, Director of Institute of Borneo Studies, UNIMAS, joined by Puan Fairul Azida Shahabuddin, Deputy Director of Education, Human Capital Development Division, Ministry of Economy, Dr. Renat Siu, Group Head of Corporate Sustainability from Yinsen. Also a familiar face, Mr. Azrul Muhammad Khalid, Founder and CEO of Gallen Center. And believe it or not, ladies and gentlemen, I interviewed this young gentleman on TV 2-3 years ago, and now he's a doctor, Dr. Magesh Sababati, former youth climate champion, consultant UNICEF Malaysia. Without further ado, Luqman, the floor is yours.
Right, thank you very much, MC. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, I do apologize for being slightly late. I never thought that it would take me more than 2 hours to get here from home. I think it's very interesting when we talk about planetary health. We can, one of the sectors or subtopics that we can discuss, why there are so many cars on the road, including mine actually. So I don't want to give such a long intro because I think you guys are well versed about why we are here today and why what we are going to talk about at this session. I'm just going to say that I'm intrigued by what was said in the video just now because that encapsulates the whole idea, which is when one is unwell, all of us are unwell. We talk about planetary health, we talk about the links between all of us, between every single living organism, and how we affect each other, and also, how one action can affect the other, and all the others actually. So we are going to have quite a robust panel discussion with the limited time that we have. As you can see, we have quite a 360-degree holistic approach. We have representatives from the government, from the private sector, from academia, from the youth side of things, as well as from the data and research perspective by way of Mr. Azrul from the Galen Center. But we do not want to just discuss amongst ourselves, and for that we welcome any questions from the floor. The more the better. We're going to have a QR code here in just a few moments you can scan. And at the end of the session, the last 15 minutes or so, we will take questions from the floor, and we'll take as many as we can, time permitting. So we're going to have that QR code up in just a few moments. So feel free to scan throughout the session. Please give us your questions to whom it's directed to, or whether it's just a general question, and we will field the questions as best as we can. Thank you very much. So without further ado, I want to get straight to it. And whenever I do these sessions, I always like to start with the government representative, because I think sometimes the government has the most to answer for. Actually, not sometimes, but most of the time. YB, yeah? Sorry, YB, just being playful. All right, so we've got Puan Fairul Azida Shahabuddin from the Ministry of Economy. So I just want to start by asking you, from your vantage point at the Ministry of Economy, because you are focused mainly on the human capital side of things, talent development side of things. When we talk about planetary health initiatives, that's one of the items or pillars that are often forgotten, the human capital side of it, future talent that will make this work. So from the vantage point of the Ministry of Economy, how does Malaysia currently define planetary health? And how is this concept embedded into national economic planning, including talent development? Yeah, you have to hold the button for a couple seconds. Okay? Now you can have mine. It's okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Luqman. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. It's nice to be with among familiar faces. YB Chang used to be my minister, and now I'm the other side in Ministry of Economy. Thank you for a very important question. But again, I think the pinnacle of launching is about doing everything together with the terrarium. So in this regard, it doesn't, the responsibility doesn't lie with this government. It involves the whole nation, including the government, the third sector, the private sector, to come together. But what government can do is in terms of introducing or imposing policies and programs and initiatives that helps to safeguard the planet, the humans, the animals, for our own interests, for our own benefit. Because in the name of development, we should not sacrifice our future in terms of environment. And with this question, I would like to put it into two ways. First is if we look at it into the government reforms, initiatives and everything. Recently, the Ministry of Economy just launched RMK 13. It's a 5-year long plan. And within that RMK, it embedded across all the chapter is about safeguarding planetary health and about to making sure that all our policies, all our programs, all our initiatives would consider whatever development would not be detrimental to the health of our planet, which means we are conscious to make sure that our efforts would consider, inculcate, embedded all this. It's not just about mitigating, flash floods or trying to manage back some of the destruction, I would say, that have caused before the prior planning. It's about preventive. And this can be done through two things. From perspective of children, those who are in schools, in education systems, either in the primary, secondary, preschools, early childhood, and even within the Ministry of Education, Education Development Plan, in Trust 6, one of the things that is embedded there is about, planetary health. It's about taking care of our environment. And this being embedded in our curriculum. And even we produce engineers, we produce, doctors and planners, with urban planning and everything. It has to be nature-based solutions. It will involve a lot of taking care, safeguarding. Because by the end of the day, as much as in the Quran it says that this planet is, I had a discussion with Prof before. It's about, we are the only guardian. We are taking care of it. And we have to make sure that our future would still have that a planet that is safe. It is conducive for living. And it's something that we can appreciate from, flora and fauna and so on. Right. But in this sense as well, what I would like to say that within the RMK 13, and also we have done some studies with ASM about the education reform. We're looking into providing or producing a TVET, green TVET, engineers with the conscious of building things that consider the environment impact. It's not just about making money. It's about having another thing that we're trying to embed it slowly within our curriculum is that a human-centric with a conscience of taking care of the planetary health. That when we do good, we produce good things, and when we take care of good things will come back to us. In that sense.
We are talking about bridging policy and practice, right? I think we do have good policies, and we have good policies, more good policies coming up. But I think one common criticism, and this is not just regarding planetary health, but across the board, whatever the government does, whichever government it is when it comes to implementation, there's always something lacking. So I think this fits in well with our topic, bridging policy and practice, because we have multiple frameworks. On top, we have the Malaysia Madani Economy Framework. And then we have the NETR, we have the National Energy Transition Roadmap. We have countless other sustainability-driven initiatives. So one common question that's asked is that so many agencies, a number of ministries are involved in all these grand initiatives. How do we make sure that execution is coordinated and seamless? Because there are so many chefs that are cooking this soup.
I'm glad you asked that question, Lukman. That's a really good point. Coming back again, everybody has to chip in for that terrarium. And this, with that note, it takes every ministry to come together. It's not just within MOSTI. It's not within NRES. It's not within Petra. It's not within Ministry of Economy. It should involve everybody. That is why in the government we have GGP, Green Government Procurement, where ministries are encouraged to procure items, services that will ensure that the safety of the planet is there. We focus on the green products. And the other part is as well with the MySTI. We have a lot of, it's also another initiative by the government that encourage local R&D products, which focuses on the green technologies as well, to be bought by the ministries. So we are using it because the government is the biggest customer in the country, and we should start off with that. And it also encourage for other industries through tax incentive and so on, and also with CCUS. For example, why I said this should be embedded across ministry, it's a task of all ministry. In 2022, MOSTI was entrusted with the task of being in charge of Malaysia Pavilion in Dubai. So one of our pavilion buildings was made with, sustainabilities with the Malaysian flag in that. But what we do is that we have a carbon trade-off, carbon footprint trade-off. We will have to plant trees as part of building some other buildings and so on. This part is about, educating by doing, to ensure that it ingrains itself by activities, by programs that will give you that conscious that it is our task, everybody, the government and the private, the school children, the academia to come together, the quintuple helix to come together and help it. And it's a continuous process. It's something that we have to do it continuously and keep reiterating, for example, like having this kind of forum to remind us that this is everybody's job to do it.
Yeah, I'm so glad you ended on that note, because that's kind of leading into my next question that I want to pose to Dr. Renard, because you are the so-called corporate rep here on this panel, right? Whenever a program or an initiative, is not executed well or does not get a good enough reception or is behind schedule and things like that, we always call on everyone. Like Puan Fairul just mentioned just now, we need support from private sector because private sector has, in some ways, more capabilities, especially financial-wise, especially in terms of capital, etc. But of course, the common thought is that for corporate players, you have shareholders, you have stakeholders. Your main mandate, and this is not necessarily wrong. Your main mandate is to chase profits, which is not wrong. So such initiatives, environmental initiatives so far, are not that lucrative, and that's one of the reasons why the private sector is a bit slow in actually going all in 100%, despite what you're seeing in press releases, etc. Right? So from a corporate sustainability standpoint, how is the private sector interpreting planetary health? Are you looking at it from a risk framework point of view, an investment opportunity, or just purely CSR, a moral imperative?
Yeah, thanks, Lukman. I think there's a lot packed into that question. But maybe I'll start off by saying that, one of our pain points as corporate sustainability practitioners is sometimes we have a lot of roadmaps, but we don't really see the roads. So as you rightly pointed out, right, there's a lot, like you got your RMK13, NETR, and, the National Health Planetary Action Plan. I think for corporates, we need to be able to contextualize and internalize a lot of, translating a lot of the action plans, right, into something that's manageable and understandable at a corporate level. And it's not easy. Going back to your point, I think, by virtue of the fact that we are publicly listed, there's a lot of reporting compliance requirements that we need to fulfill. You know, like last 2 years, it was, you know, the task force for climate financial disclosures. This year, there was a lot of emphasis on nature financial disclosures. And we need to go and source out for a lot of contextualized data, depending on where our assets are. And we rely a lot on scientists and engineers to actually provide that sort of context. The assets that we're going to be, you know, like developing, building, we need to know whether we're operating in high water stress areas. Because what if you're competing with water industry usage versus residential usage? Who's going to be taking accountability for that? You know, we spoke about planetary health, right? Breaching 7 out of the 9 planetary boundaries. Climate change, land use change. When we're actually developing renewables project, these are the sorts of EIA, environmental impact assessments that we have to do. Are we encroaching into a path of migratory birds, for example? So a lot of this are actually translated into real actions that I think corporates really have to take on the ground. But I would probably say that one key risk area that I think we still need to be able to bridge is the industry and the academia gaps. So the sort of seamless communication, I think, needs to take place, right? In terms of understanding, contextualizing the data sets and the risks that actually arises from doing a lot of this assessments. I think we're at a nascent stage, and we really have to get to a stage of maturity. So that's really just from a risk perspective, right? I wanted to just add on by saying that at the end of the day, a lot of this risk translates back into, you know, potentially economic losses if businesses are not resilient and taking, you know, like steps ahead of it. So in some ways, we are not just doing this purely for CSR, a philanthropic perspective, but we're really doing this because we need to safeguard our operations and making sure that there's longevity and resilience for many, many years to come.
So, is there a challenge in actually getting the private sector to base or to adapt their whole operations end-to-end across the supply chain, etc., really with the environment first in mind, rather than just to you know, achieve some sort of environmental KPI, feel some sort of quota that is mandated upon them by the government or the public? So how do you make sure that it's always environmental first thinking and not just checking this box this year?
Yeah, I mean, for us, it's definitely not a checkbox exercise. If we wanted to do that, I think we have failed the intent, right, of actually wanting to pursue sustainability to begin with. I think the whole idea here is really to be able to balance up between what are some of the key prioritization, right, in terms of risks and opportunities. And of course, I'm simplifying this, right, because we're an energy infrastructure company, but of course, depending on the nature of your business, you would have different key priorities that you need to focus on. So I would say for us, like, really, it's not a checkbox exercise. It's really one where we, you know, sort of approach it from a very strategic manner. So we do see opportunities in planning ahead. And like I say, preparing, right, for the worst case scenario. If we had assets like charging point operators that, you know, and we don't even consider whether a certain area is going to be inundated with water risk, right? And then say a flood were to happen, it translates into huge millions of economic losses, right, for the company and the organization as a whole. But if we had done our planning beforehand, we know that there are certain hotspot areas where we'll be operating in. We would actually make sure that we have done our due diligence, that we have actually looked at what are some of the risk-based approach, right? It could be looking at insurance opportunities. It could be avoiding some of these hotspot areas. And I think that would actually make our business in some ways, right, a little bit more resilient than we were.
Thanks, Doctor. I want to switch gears a bit. I want to move over to Professor Pauline. I want to take a unique view, because there's one thing that people don't realize, because you work a lot with indigenous peoples, right? I think there's something very beautiful about indigenous peoples, and they can all teach us a lesson, because indigenous peoples have always thrived with and because of the environment for many, many hundreds of years or even thousands of years without destroying it. So I want to ask what lessons can we learn, but I can foresee that some people will say, yeah, of course, indigenous peoples, they are not such a big group. We're talking about whole countries wanting to develop. Of course, the carbon footprint, etc., is going to be bigger. So I'm going to rephrase my question a bit. How can we apply this way of life, the way of life that indigenous peoples of live and let live, to industrial scale developments for whole countries and societies? Can it be done, Professor?
Can it be done? Well, first of all, it is important to understand that indigenous governance systems are Malaysia's oldest environmental management institutions that we need to accept. And they ensure for generations the balance between people, forest, water, and land. Yeah, planetary health becomes stronger when these knowledge systems are recognized as strategic, not symbolism. So oftentimes we look at indigenous people as, oh, they are just cultural being, right, traditional being. But if we understand how they manage, how they relate with the planet, I think that will make, it's an awareness and a consciousness about how you relate with the environment. A good example basically is how indigenous land stewardship support climate resilience. In Sarawak, for instance, Sarawak communities have conserved watersheds, forest, biodiversity, long before we name it as climate resilience. Yeah, their practices are grounded in reciprocity and responsibility, not only towards the environment, but even between, more so between we as people, right? So that the idea of reciprocity is very important. So when we honor this stewardship, we strengthen Malaysia's climate future. Now, some people may be wondering, isn't indigenous knowledge too local to influence national policy or practices? Whether the strength, its locality, it is place specific, it is adaptive, and deeply ecological. So national policy improves when grounded in solutions that are already proven on the land. So that's basically how an indigenous person would want to suggest an answer to your question, right?
I'm sorry I have to borrow your microphone because you're working on mine. Seems to be some technical problem, but I just have a quick follow-up before I go to Azrul and Dr. Mogesh. Sorry for waiting. We often talk about how big countries, the main polluters and emitters, and the impacts of what they do or what they've been doing affect people, say, the Pacific Islanders who are most affected because they have small nations, seaside nations, etc. So if I want to apply that to a Malaysian context, right? We talk about indigenous peoples who thrive with the environment. I think the first example that comes to mind is Borneo, of course. Where do you see the biggest disconnect between national level sustainability policies and the lived realities of indigenous and rural communities in Borneo?
I think the issue here is policies are good at framing intentions, yeah, but often miss the lived realities of diverse ecologies. Yeah, so implementation fails when it assumes uniformity across Malaysia, right? So I think even across, we know the issues between the federal and the states at the moment, right? So that translates into these issues as well. So bridging the gaps requires policies that bend towards the landscape. Even in Sarawak, for instance, in the landscape that I'm working with, Barrio is up in the highlands, which is completely different landscape. And then I'm also working with communities that live around, along the riverine communities, along Baram and Rejang River. So they are different. Their lifestyle is different from those living in the mountains. And then you have the Melanau group and the Malays living along the coastal areas. So completely different. We are in the same, perhaps, geography, but the landscape basically quite different. So flexibility is the answer, right? So one size fits all implementation doesn't work across these places that I've just mentioned. Yeah, so in a sense that policies must respect ecological diversity and community agency. And in fact, I'm even promoting this idea in UNIMAS that we begin to look beyond ethnic grouping. So that is where we always look at Malaysia. For instance, we use ethnic categories to understand each other. But how about looking at geography, where we are placed in the landscape? How does the landscape or the geography influence the way we live? If you live near the coast, along the riverine, along the rivers and the mountains, because ecology doesn't say, oh, this person is a Christian, this person is a Buddhist, a Malay, therefore I will respond differently. But I think we need to take that into consideration. So, yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Professor. I want to move over to Mr. Azrul, because Azrul, I think you are at a very unique position because the Galen Center, which you're with, is right at the intersection of health, policy, and social development. So I think honestly, I think you can say that a lot of people, not everyone, but a lot of people don't really care about something that much until it affects them directly. People probably won't care about planetary health until it affects, or they feel it affects their health. So how do you see planetary health influencing the future of Malaysia's public health system?
Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and a very good afternoon. Firstly, can I just congratulate ASM on the finalization and publication of the Planetary Health Action Plan. I am quite heartened to learn from the speech this morning that the genesis of this document came from the aftermath of the COVID years, and certainly taking on the lessons learned, and that's certainly something to bear in mind when we talk about planetary health and the consequences of not preparing, or not just in terms of the framework for preparedness, but also resiliency, which is something that we sometimes forget. To go to your question really, and this is where we face a major challenge when we talk about these documents, these policy frameworks that exist in a certain chamber that sometimes can be very echoey, very shock sendiri lah, you know. And I've been guilty of some of this stuff myself, because some of this policy, some of these frameworks, you know, we help draft some of this stuff, you know. And when you're together with like-minded individuals who speak the same language, who know what you're talking about, who are advocates themselves, who are passionate about it, it's very easy to lose sight and forget about the people who are outside that room and are not part of your clique of friends and colleagues and fellow advocates. And so one of the challenges that we look at, the title of this session, which is Bridging Policies to Practice, is to ensure that we're able to communicate effectively what we're trying to get people to do, and for people to understand, but also to then take that, own that, and therefore change their behavior if necessary. Now, if you work in public health, you probably will very well understand and realize that change behavior, or behavior change, is one of the hardest things to actually call for. I mean, look at cigarette smoking, for example. I mean, it's just an almost impossible thing to do. But this is where, when we talk about these concepts, we have to get people to understand and help people visualize, what does planetary health mean? I think that's very important. What does it mean to each and in one of us, as organizations, as communities, as families, as individuals? What does it all mean? Is it some vague, airy-fairy concept that sounds good, but sounds very big? But we don't realize that we're a microcosm contributing to the larger ecosystem. So it's very important for us to ensure that there is translation of these concepts into real-life examples of what one can do within an organization, within communities, families, and so forth. And also, do not underplay or underestimate the challenges in terms of translating this stuff up. And I think it was mentioned earlier at the very beginning, the nexus or the challenge of having these concepts in competition with economic priorities, for example. How does that, you know, we talk about environment, we talk about economy at the same time, we talk about livelihoods, trying to build upward mobility of societies and so forth, and they all compete with each other. And I'm going to give an example of a little bit controversial example. So if I get banned from MITI later on, or Ministry of Economics, this is the reason why. I just remember this example.
But not MOSTI, don't worry.
No,
Not
well,
MOSTI.
MOSTI, maybe MOSTI also. So let's try it out. Sorry, Minister, we'll see what happens. I give you an example of data centers. Now, there's a mushrooming of data centers down in Johor. Now, if you work in this field, you realize that data centers are a very important nexus of innovation, technology, socio-economic benefits, contributing to the internet, but most importantly, making Malaysia a major player in this developing IT world and so forth. But it comes at economic costs and also environmental costs. And though it may provide jobs, the jobs may be small in number, but the environmental cost could be very huge. And one of the key elements concerning data centers is the usage of water. And this is one of the more controversial stuff that you see in the US and so forth. And water is being utilized at a humongous rate for data centers. Where does the water come from? Does it take from the community? Does it then discharge that into the community, back into the community? Now, the good thing about the Malaysian government approach concerning this issue is that it has insisted that, first of all, raw water to be used, not treated, but raw water, and that treatment of that water should be borne at the expense of the business or the facility in question, so that the costs there are able to be, if you want to have a data center, you also have to ensure that you have the treatment of the water that you're going to use for it. But it doesn't address the issue of the environmental cost. So that's a tricky part there, like, is it worth it having dozens of data centers in Johor when the costs could be quite high for the environment? And just before I end my intervention, I just wanted to also mention, like, for example, our carbon footprint, the usage of energy, the usage of carbon. This event, for example, I would argue, did we audit or will we audit the carbon footprint for this event? Is there wastage of energy? The air conditioning, the lights, the gimmicks, and so forth. We have to be honest in order for us to be able to take a sincere approach to planetary health. We have to install frameworks that automatically audit ourselves to ensure that we're in compliance with the concepts and principles and values of planetary health. I think that's very important for us to embed within not just organizations, systems, institutions, but also within ourselves as well, as families, communities, and individuals.
Right. I think you touched on a very topic that's quite close to my heart, because I think because last year I spent about 2.5 months in Cambridge studying AI and data centers, and I come across this piece of data saying that Ireland, one of the countries with the highest number of data centers, or at least the top 3 in the world, the data centers in that country use up more water than every dwelling in the country combined. So that gives you a scale of what you're up against in chasing scientific and economic development, but at what cost, as you mentioned just now, right? Obviously, these things are going to take time before we figure it out, right? Do we not chase rapid economic development to save the environment? I don't think a lot of people would agree 100% on that. We have to find some sort of a balance. So it's going to take time for us to figure it out, take time for things to even out, etc. But are there any quick wins to you? What are, say, policy blind spots that we can execute fairly quickly at this point in time before we figure out the bigger stuff?
Well, the good news is that, and I don't claim to be a know-it-all on these sort of issues, but I found that one of the lessons that we are able to take from the COVID crisis is one which is that when we talk about whole of society, whole of government, whole of nation, in the past, I would argue that this would be vague concepts, Sounds very nice, we have an idea of what it looks like and everything, but we never seen it in action before. But COVID showed us what can happen if we really put our minds to it, if we're disciplined about it, and to mobilize the different parts of a society or community or government itself. The problem here is sometimes that we are going for the big stuff, the overarching macro lens and forget about the small stuff that we can do, the low-hanging fruit. You know, the engagement with the communities. For example, the Orang Asal communities, for example. What can we do today with them that would be in line with planetary health, which they don't have to change their lifestyle in order for them to be able to be in compliance? Have we asked that question? Are we looking at policies that we can already adapt within the existing framework today? For example, you know, if you go to, I'm going to really get ostracized by the government after this. You go to Putrajaya, for example, and you go to the offices in government. If you go to some of the European government offices, you'll notice something very interesting. The hallway will be dark until somebody walks into that hallway and then the light goes on. And it's energy efficiency, there's energy saving. I can tell you when it comes to the simple question about energy saving, we haven't been able to address that issue yet, even though the solutions are very much available and the approaches are very mature. Why don't we install stuff like that into our structures, institutions, offices, and facilities? We still haven't done it. And I think that goes back to the issue of political will, the willingness to do these things, to change. And I have to say that this government has been one of the better governments which has the political will to do and make the tough decisions without being tokenistic about it, which we've seen in the past. But this government right now, I'm not sucking up to the minister, by the way, just in case anybody's wondering. I'm just saying that basically there is a sincere effort to put into place institutions, policies to back that up, but also the walk the talk, you know. And this is something that's encouraging to see. But the issue for you, I think, would be the sustainability issue. Yeah. Can we continue to do this in the next 5 or 10 years? Because that's when we really see the returns from that investment that we keep talking about. But don't go just for the big stuff. Go for the smaller stuff as well. In schools, in offices, and so forth, where we can implement the planetary health agenda without doing too much or changing too much.
Yeah, it adds up. This little stuff adds up. And it really is a long game, right? It's really a long-term investment. And perhaps for any government, to be fair, it's the rakyat can be so impatient. They would need things that they can show and flash fairly quickly. Because we have this long-term game, it's not often politically, very convenient for whatever government is in power. And talking about the long game, I want to finally go to Dr. Mogesh. Dr. Mogesh is our youth representative. He's a former youth climate champions consultant at UNICEF Malaysia. Dr. Mogesh, you guys are in it for the long run. You guys are the youth. I used to be the youth a few years ago, but I just crossed the threshold into not so youth anymore. You guys are often, the belief is that, I don't know whether it's fair or not, the belief is that youth care more about these issues rather than the older generations. I'm not sure if that's fair or not, but that's the common belief, right? Because they're more invested in it, because they're actually going to live through it more or longer. You are often invited into policy discussions, but often not given decision-making power. From your experience shaping or helping to shape national plans, are there concrete mechanisms beyond rhetorics, beyond populist measures, that can shift youth from spectators or quota-filling individuals, right, to actual co-architects of policy where you can actually affect the decisions that are being made?
Right. Thank you, Lukman, for the question. Well, first of all, age is not a number. It's in the mindset. Right. I think, before I get into my intervention, I must thank YB Minister and ASM for really spearheading this initiative and really for giving the young people a voice and for championing the whole planetary health agenda. But the big question, really we had this conversation, we were really happy to see the book finally coming into, put together and being launched here. But the big question here is how are we going to implement it and how are we going to translate whatever is in that book now into action, right? So, coming back to your question, right? Young people care more about the environment. Is it true? I think it's partially true, right? Young people can be seen as louder in the whole activism space. I think mainly because young people today, especially, are living in the whole see, thanks to whatever that's happening today, right? The young people today, were living amongst everything that's happening, especially, the recent floods. We're seeing how heat waves are affecting young children not being able to go to schools, schools being closed due to haze, and many other, climate-related events, environment-related events that's affecting the livelihoods of people, and especially vulnerable communities, including children and young people, right? And, on the other hand, the older generation, especially, communities that are affected by the floods, communities who are like farmers, who know what's actually happening, and they have been adapting to whatever that's happening. I think, they have been aware, they know what climate change is long before, the whole climate activism became a thing, right? So I think it's really about how we're going to bridge the gap, the intergenerational gap, and to create an intergenerational coalition, if I can say, right? So I think really the problem is, this is going to be controversial as well. See, the older people, it's not that they don't care, but I think the systems that the older generation run today still expect youth to care quietly, right? Which is sad, right? But I'm happy that, NRES, for instance, the last 2 years, I have been, I've had the chance to be part of the youth cluster with the ministry, and also as part of the Majlis Tindakan Perubahan Iklim Negara, which is chaired by the Prime Minister himself. The meeting was held just earlier this year. It's nice to have a seat at the table where decisions are being made, but how much of our inputs and perspectives are taken into consideration. So right now, the problem is not awareness anymore. Young people are aware. There's a recent study that was done, not recent, 2 years ago, UNICEF, Econites, which says 92% of young people in Malaysia are aware of climate change, are aware of the climate crisis, but they just don't know where to start, what to do about it, right? So it's no longer about the awareness. It's really about how we're going to mobilize these youths into, putting these perspectives into action. Now, the second thing is that I really, really want to emphasize is that the science now is clear, right? We have the data, we have the number, and I want to just mention that I myself am a lung researcher, right? And my work has very little to do with climate change, but I have been in the climate space because I'm very passionate about this. But passion alone does not pay us, right? And a lot of young people who are within this space are underpaid, we are overworked, but we still do what we do because we are living the reality. And we're afraid, climate anxiety is real. We're afraid of, are we going to live the world the way we're living today for our children, our kids to come, and the future generations, right? So, the science is clear. We have all the data, we have all the numbers, but I like to remind myself, every single number, every single data that's out there has a story. It's a story of people who have struggled. It's a story of people who have lived the realities, the difficult realities. So I think it's really about time that we look at how these numbers can be translated into actions that could really bring meaningful change and meaningful impacts to the societies and the at the global scale, if possible.
I'm just going to squeeze in one more quick question to Mogesh before we go to the Q&A. Is the youth climate movement in Malaysia at risk of burnout or fragmentation? I think you see this across the board, not just when you're talking about climate activism, right? You see politics, for example, you see young politicians being very idealistic, and then they move up the system, and then they become, one kind, but they become institutionalized. And I think this goes across the board. I think it's probably institutionalization, it's probably age, it's probably lower energy, I don't know. But long term, how do you ensure that this movement or this group of people ensure that what they're fighting for remains meaningful, impactful, and just as energetic as day one?
Right. I think burnouts and fragmentation are definitely real risk, right? And I think to stay meaningful, we need, number one, sustainable funding, because we can have plenty of action plans, frameworks, but if there's no money, we cannot do anything, right? So number one, sustainable funding, institutionalizing the youth's role within the system. Number three is capacity building over performative action, really to train these young people to speak the language that these policymakers are speaking. And really, I mean, if I could quickly share, young people are on the rise, right? We're no longer just standing on the streets with our placards screaming about, we need to take action. But right now, young people are actually in the seats where decisions are being made, which is great. And we are already learning how, the whole policy-making world is working. And in fact, when I was at COP, I just arrived 2 days ago, we could see, I mean, really, in the conversations that we were having, there were so many young people who were actually following actual negotiations, and they were in the negotiation rooms. And I myself was following Global Goal and Adaptation, GGA, and many, many young people out there were also following many different agenda items like the loss and damage, climate finance, and many technical things that we thought young people were not capable of following, right? And now I think it's about time that we start training these young people on how to really mobilize them to use their skill sets and really to train them to speak the same language as, coming back to the, same language as the older generations, as we say, right? And really, I think to have a clear metrics of how these young people could contribute to the whole system. But there are a few uncomfortable truths for the young people and for institutions. Now, number one, for young people who are out there, who's listening, who are in this room, I think number one, being loud does not equate to being strategic. I think that's really important. Number two, grassroots cannot survive on passion alone. So they definitely have got to, get into spaces where they could professionalize their roles and to get into actual spaces where they could use their professional skills and expertise. Number three, we need policy literacy and not just campaigning, right? And this has to be really, I think the national education system has got to now look into how can we train these young people into, enhancing policy literacy among young people. And as for institutions, I think we have to stop romanticizing youth struggle, right? It's really easy to really think that young people, the youths are mostly volunteers. We don't need to be paid for, the amount of time that we put out there to really do all these work. But I think that is wrong because, like I said, we really need to stop outsourcing climate responsibilities to unpaid youth, because whatever that we are doing is equally as important. And I love saying this, that it is about time that we look at young people as partners in policy makings and major decision making, which I, definitely being as part of this, the drafting of the NPHAP, I'm very fortunate to be on board and really to contribute to this very meaningful document. But, what we want to see is to have more roles like this in major decisions at the national level and international level. And, really one way to go about it is, again, going back to my COP experience, my reflection was that, it's really sad to see how we still do not have youth representation in the negotiation tables, where that is where actual decisions are being made at the global scale, right? And, when we compare to countries like Mongolia, I had the chance to meet with some youth negotiators from Mongolia, from the UK, from Tunisia, and these young people were actually trained by the government to have young people at the tables where negotiations are done, where decisions are being made, not only at the national level, but also at the international level. So I think it is time that we move into that direction. We have been, we have been speeding towards the wrong direction this whole time. Now I think it's about time that we start looking at, these different initiatives and efforts that we could start partaking, and really from the things that we have listed down in this action plan are definitely something that we need to start focusing on to translate into actionable items.
Right. Thank you, Dr. Mogesh. So we're going to go into the question and answer now. We have the final 15 minutes. Thank you so much for your questions. We've had, as expected, plenty of questions. It's a very interesting topic. Many different, perspectives. I think it's still not too late for you to post your question. We'll have the QR code. Can we have the QR code there? If we can get more questions, we have a lot already, so we're going to do our best. So I'm just going to approach this with two factors in mind. First, I'll pick the questions with the most upvotes, right? To be fair, because these are clearly the most requested or supported questions, but also at the same time, I will ensure that we have at least one question for each panelist. So we have a few here. I've shortlisted a few. This first question is the one with the most upvotes. Now, some of the questions explicitly state to whom it is directed, but most are not, but I think it's quite obvious. So this first question with the most number of upvotes, I think I think Dr. Renat will be best positioned to answer. And the question goes, how do we bring the shift and change the mindset from ROI towards ROV oriented on the policies which more towards capitalism and need to go beyond GDP?
Well, I think that's loaded one again. I mean, clearly moving from ROI to ROV, right, is one of those key principles that have, we've heard from the earlier presentations. I would say that from a corporate lens, we probably need to ensure that there's a shift in mindset, right? That we're no longer just serving shareholders, so to speak, right? Which is really the ROI language, like how, what's your return gonna be in the next 3 years, 5 years coming from now? To actually moving from shareholders to stakeholders. So realizing that actually as a business, apart from meeting the economic targets, you also have communities that we have to serve, which is where our business operations are at. We have alignment that we need to do, right, with government entities. And when I talk about communities, by the way, I think it also includes indigenous communities, those marginalized ones whose voices are often unheard, right, in some of these project developments. Just to give you an example, when we talk about RE export, right, like one very common example is the hydropower export from LTMS, the Laos, Thai, Malaysia, Singapore project, right, 100 megawatts of RE being exported all the way to Singapore. Now, there were a lot of complaints actually that was happening along the Mekong River about potential fishermen displacement. And these are actually, jobs that have already been passed down from one generation to another. So where are all of these environmental and social safeguards that needed to be in place? Like, who takes accountability of ensuring that the rights of the people, right, upstream, that are being affected are actually protected? And I think those are essentially, I think, the concept of ROV, right? Really focusing on values-based approach and integrating that into decision-making. So at the corporate board level, I would probably say that the conversations shouldn't just stick with numbers and figures, but also to think about, like what's going to happen to affected communities, right? Really putting people at the center of it. One of the human centricity approach, right? Which is one of the core principles of the National Planetary Health Action Plan. So for me, I think that essentially represents a shift, right? From ROI to ROV.
Thank you, Dr. Renat. This next question is also interesting. It's got upvotes as well. And I think Puan Fairul is the best position to answer this, in my opinion. So it's simple. Who will cover the expensive cost of restructuring Malaysian SMEs for sustainability compliance?
I'm sorry again, can you repeat the question?
Who will cover the expensive cost of restructuring Malaysian SMEs for sustainability compliance?
Oh, you put me on the spot.
Me, the question.
It should be answered by Ministry of Finance, but anyway, how? Supporting SME can be in many ways, not just monetary. Supporting can be in terms of enabling a conducive environment for them to thrive. Providing another assistance, not in terms of monetary, but probably about tax rebates and so on, to ensure that there is an element of sustainability. And we encourage more into the green investments, and the MNC will come together. It's not just the burden of helping SME goes to the government, but also the private, the MNCs, the industries that come together. I think there's a lot of government initiatives which is not being marketed well. For example, in terms of having engagement with the public when any policies are going to be implemented. We put it out online, and we would put it in like 1 month, 2 months, for the public to look into it and then give response towards that. And I'm just going to jump to certain things. To transition, it requires a lot of, allocations and so on. But we're going there. We're going there. Having this discussion is a good, important event that we have to appreciate that the government is doing it slowly and continuously. And it across SME, is across private, and it has to be in annual budget as well. As we've seen in annual budget, there's a lot of emphasis was given on the green investment and green technology, as mentioned by the YB Chang as well. It's about going nanotechnology, green technology, and I'm sure in Technology Park Malaysia we do have a few of data centers, and the issue is about water, how to make it sustainable, and how to balance between providing job opportunities, not missing out, at the same time to ensure that we are safeguarding our well-being, planet, health, and providing good job opportunities. Again, I just want to probably highlight a few things. Sometimes it is better to do things in the most basic way. For example, and using a local wisdom, I just want to highlight certain things and how can we embed this awareness, this conscious of loving and to preserve and to sustain is through doing small things. For example, I visit this school, international school called Suci in Bukit Jalil. So one of the things that embedded in the curriculum is that from preschool, primary and secondary, they would have to bring their own utensils and they will eat together vegetarian food at the hall. And they have to, pick it up, clean their utensils, do it everything by themselves. And not just in school. The parents are encouraged to take picture so the habit continues at home. The same thing when we want to educate about planetary health, about sustainability, about preserving, conservation, climate literacy. It has to go seamless from schools, from the environment, goes back to the home itself.
Right.
Would that answer the question?
I think that's a satisfactory answer, considering the fact that you're not in the best position to answer that question, although you are the best position by right on this stage right here. So I do apologize about that. So the next question, I think it's suitable for Azrul. Azrul, the question goes, in the medical field, disposable plastics are being heavily used. What can we do to reduce such impact? There's a certain degree of irony here, right?
Thanks. Yeah, that's a really tough question. I was in the Netherlands for a mission there to look at one of these issues. And in healthcare, hygiene, sanitation, infection control measures and so forth involves a high number and high volume of utilization of plastics, for example. And one of the things that they are looking at today is a circular economy type of thing, where everything from the design of the syringe to the packaging of the syringe and even the dispensing of the syringe is being looked at to see how much you can reduce to ensure that you're able to maintain the infection and contamination control, but at the same time implement those sustainable practices. And it's incredibly tough. If you think about a simple procedure, say a minor surgery on a particular limb, for example, it could involve maybe a few kilos of plastics just for that one simple procedure. And if the plastics are not recyclable, or they may be the syringe, the tubing, the different paraphernalia, the consumables, medical consumables used are one-time use only, which they very often are, then that's huge wastage from a simple procedure. And there are millions of procedures, from minor to more major procedures, being done every day around the world. And in Malaysia, it is very much the case because we have a very big medical healthcare space. So you can imagine that something like this requires even a rethinking of how we look at basic concepts that we've been taking for granted. And we're not there yet, to be honest. And I don't think we'll be there yet for many years to come, because we have to not only make it sustainable, it has to be also cost effective, it has to be affordable, it has to be low in price, and economies of scale are just not ramping up as fast as it can be, because we also demand for cheaper healthcare. You know, we don't want medical inflation to go up and cause people to be unable to afford care. So there's a lot of challenges there that is an ongoing process. It requires a lot of investment. And most importantly, I think at one point, it requires commitment to an initial high volume or high amount of expenditure to invest in those practices before you can benefit from much more reduced costs later on during that pathway and journey. It's incredibly tough, because right now it's pakai buang, you know, it's disposable all the way, simply for the purposes of ensuring that it's infection and contamination control. And that's just one small aspect of healthcare.
Right. Thanks, Azrul. We have a few questions about the indigenous peoples here for Professor Pauline. I think I can merge two questions that are similar. So the first one goes, the indigenous orang asli or orang asal, the sustainable people and have traditional environmental practices, but in reality, their voices are only a side dish. There's a term used. How to resolve this? The fact that the indigenous peoples, their voices are not really heard. And I'm going to combine this with this question. How can the federal and state government, the corporate sector and NGOs work according to the rules of law so that any development will not victimize the grassroots, especially marginalized communities?
Thank you for that very good question. I'll start with the second question. Yeah. How can we ensure that the indigenous peoples, both in Peninsular Malaysia and Sabah and Sarawak, their concerns or their framework or their perspective are taken care of or even considered? FPIC is at the moment being practiced as just a sideline, just to kind of in use in consultancies and use in different framework, just to kind of meet certain standard that is required by, let's say, international standards. Recently we had a dialogue in Sarawak. My proposal to the state government is basically to make FPIC as part of the regulation. Yeah, to do free prior informed consent as part of the framework when we do whatever it is. At the moment, for instance, only even SIA is not even considered as a must in some of the consultancy, in some of the project that is being put out. Yes, the environmental EIA is considered very important, but the SIA is not considered as important, the social impact assessment. So I think this is some of the practices that we need to be put into as law of the land, as part of the practice. Even now, heritage, I know HIA is important in places like the UK, like Australia and different places. Heritage impact assessment is very considered very important framework. Let's say in London, for instance, if you want to build a building, HIA is considered very important, right? Heritage impact assessment. But these are not yet part of the law of the land here in Malaysia. So some of those things I think should be considered seriously. What was the first question? Sorry.
How does the state government, the federal government, NGOs work together to ensure development does not victimize or marginalize indigenous peoples?
I think there must be a change of consciousness and awareness, because I mean, let's say in this room, when I first mentioned indigenous person or people, what goes in your mind, right? So it's always the idea they are isolated, they are non-educated, they are operating from a different system. So there is that mindset. So some people, they act as a result of ignorance, or sometimes they see indigenous people as part of the alam, which is not related to your alam. I remember when I was working with 7 years, I was working with indigenous people in Kelantan and Pahang. One time, one guy came to me and said, You know, I was invited to an academic forum, and I was quite taken aback when the presenter said the orang asli is part of the alam and part of the dunia binatang and tumbuhan. So he said, I feel so sad, Prof. Is this how the world look at us? Is this how the academics look at us? Is that the reason why they treat us the way they've been treating us? Is that the prominent perspective on us? So I think there must be a change of perspective how we look at them.
Right. Thank you, Professor. We are out of time, but I want to squeeze in one question for Dr. Mogesh to be fair. Planetary health is human health. How do we measure the impact of the policies and practices laid out in the NPHAP on specific health outcomes?
I think first and foremost, we need to understand that, we are very privileged to be sitting in this air-conditioned room, very fancy setting, but we're talking about people who are out there, who are actually living the realities, the very difficult realities, who have got to go through floods every single year, with so much of different health impacts. And I think, keeping this in mind, like I mentioned before, right, all the numbers, all the statistics that we have, all of this are connected to every single people who are out there, who are actually experiencing things. So if we keep this in mind, we will know exactly our way forward in terms of translating the policies on paper. And I think it's about time that we do not only create policies, we do not only create action plans and frameworks, but I think it's time that we create implementation binding agreements where now we assess how much of these action plans and frameworks and policies and plans are being translated into things and have been implemented successfully. Because I think, the part that we oftentimes overlook or we fail to really look at is whether or not everything that is on the paper are being, actually implemented effectively at the grassroots level, right? Sometimes they just remain on the paper. They're also nice, right? And Malaysia in particular were very good at making these policy papers, right? But, actually when it comes to implementation, that's where the challenge is, right? So I think it is now time that we look at, how do we monitor these, we assess the implementation of it, and really hold these people accountable for all these promises that they're making. If the ministry is making a promise that they will, let's say, keep up, keep greenhouse gas emissions to a certain level, then how do we hold them accountable? Is there a mechanism for it? How do we monitor the effective implementation of it, right? So I think this is where we're lacking at the moment, and we really have to focus on it. And I hope I answered your question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Mogesh. Ladies and gentlemen, round of applause for my wonderful panelists, Puan Fairul Azida Shahabuddin, Dr. Renard Siu, Professor Dr. Poding Bala, Dr. Mogesh Sababati, and of course, Azrul Muhammad Khalid. Thank you so much, guys, for your wonderful insights. I only wish we had more time. We've already gone, over the allocated time already. So thank you very, very much. Thank you so much. I hope that was beneficial for you guys as well. And with that, I pass it back to the MC.
Thank you very much, Lukman. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause to our moderator and our speakers. If we could have all 5 of you make your way in front of the table for a group photo. And after that, we would like to invite the Professor Dr. Tengku and Professor Emerita Dr. Asma and Puan Hazami to join our moderators on stage for one final group photo before we conclude our forum today. Let's start with the 5 of moderators first. Once again, congratulations to SM for a successful launch of the forum and the Planetary Health Action Plan. Don't forget to download the book via the QR code that was shared on our screen. You can always, again, ask for the QR code with our Secretariat team later. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Once again, let's give them a round of applause. Congratulations to the successful launch of National Planetary Health Action Plan and also a successful forum. We hope that the discussions here will inspire continued collaboration among all our policymakers, researchers, practitioners, and all the stakeholders. So as we come to the end of today's program, once again, thank you to our speakers, panelists, participants, to everyone for your support, joining us since early morning. And we hope that all this will continue to enrich our discussions and strengthen our collective commitment to advance in planetary health. Our organizers, ASM crew, well done, everyone. We're looking forward to the next installation of the forum. And until then, we hope to see you again. Assalamualaikum and Salam Malaysia Madani.